Our story begins with a battle between life and death, where sect leaders clash due to an ancient rivalry. The leader of the demonic sect of Kingming offers a swift death to Fairy Xiaoxuan of the Pure Jade sect as long as she surrenders. He also boasts, claiming to be the first person to achieve divine possession in the cultivation world of Dayan. Believing in that, the enemy says those who obey him will be safe, but those who defy him will perish. Fairy Xiaoxuan wonders if this is truly her end. She looks at her companions and asks if they can still fight, but she sees that both Liao Qinzi and the Taoist master are finished. Soon she falls into despair, thinking her sect may truly come to an end, as it is about to be reduced to ashes. Her enemy approaches and asks if she still wants to fight, since there aren't many left alive on her side. But Xiaoxuan refuses to stop fighting, and says that as long as she remains alive, the Pure Jade sect will not perish. Motivated, she charges into battle once again. She remembers all her companions, and thinks that for the sake of the others, she must buy as much time as possible. That's why she keeps fighting, even though she's badly wounded. Unlike her opponent is still at full strength. He uses dark magic to attack, showing no mercy toward her, since she refused to surrender. But just as Xiaoxuan is about to be struck directly, she is saved by a flash of light that approaches. This light makes contact with the enemy's attack and causes a massive explosion. Then it heads straight for the enemy. He wonders if this is the restrictive sword of Xuan Qi, unsure of who wielded it, until he sees before him a warrior who saved the fairy. The one who had just arrived introduces himself as the Holy Taoist, disciple of Fairy Xiaoxuan, who lives on Yu Peak. His name is Hanju, the protagonist of the story. The enemy says that the man before him is nothing more than a mere golden core cultivator, and calls him a fool, claiming only a brat like him would dare face a foe who cultivates transformed souls. Fairy Xiaoxuan, who is the protagonist's master, tells him to step back as she'll cover him, but the protagonist doesn't want to leave her and asks her to lead the enemy to him. Hanju tells her not to worry and claims that no soul cultivator will even be able to touch a single strand of his hair. Xiaoxuan, even though she can't stand on her feet, still worries about her disciple. The protagonist says that a mere golden core cultivator like him wants to broaden his horizons and show what true strength really is. After that, he charges into battle and comes face to face with the enemy. Hanju uses the 9 Dragon Expelling Seal, an ability that is the trump card against a transformed soul cultivator. The protagonist has a system, and through it he can see his stats, so he spins a luck-based die, trying to change some of his attributes. But he ends up with an unsatisfactory result. His system tells him he is destined for solitude. Not only that, but his lifespan has been extended to 100 years. Hanju falls into despair because he doesn't want to live more than 100 years without friends, love, or family. He blames his system for this, saying it's been 11 years and the system should at least feel pity and give him something good just once. Previously, Hanju lived an ordinary life and was diagnosed with cancer at 21 years old. He didn't want to go through long and painful treatments, so he decided to stay home and wait for death. Because of that, he downloaded a generic imported cultivation game to distract himself from the pain in his body, but ended up dying suddenly while playing. But he opened his eyes and realized he was in a world that resembled the ancient times of his homeland, and found himself in a cultivation sect. His parents in this world were slaves of the Jade sect and helped plant and care for the herbs in the garden. The elder forbade slaves from cultivating spiritual herbs, as they were like poison to mortals. So when Hanju reached 6 years old in this new life, his parents fled and left him behind. The elder didn't care about the parents' escape and put the boy to work in their place until he turned 11. Hanju received a system that allows him to change his spiritual root and the innate fate of his life, but this is only possible once per day, and he's been doing this for 10 years now. He hasn't achieved anything remarkable so far, but he refuses to believe he'll live like this forever. A few days go by, and he's doing some stretches. Hanju uses his free time for that, and when he finishes, he tries to change his luck again. Soon he uses the die to see what he gets, and as always, today is not his lucky day, because his system alerts him that his root is 1 in a million trash. This leaves him beyond frustrated. Hanju even starts crying out of pure rage. Still, he tries changing his innate fate first, until he finally gets something good, something that takes him by surprise. The protagonist sees that he obtained 4 first-class innate fates, and jumps for joy like he just won the lottery. After so long trying, he rejoices for finally getting something good. Now Hanju thinks he needs to keep rolling until he gets a good spiritual root. And since he has those 4 first-class innate fates, he wouldn't mind rolling until he's 40 years old. As someone who has lived 2 lives, he wants to live in a fulfilling way, and doesn't want to be like those slaves who will remain stuck here for the rest of their lives. Therefore, he thinks that the day will definitely come when he'll write his name in history. Next, someone announces that 2 immortals from the main sect have arrived, and they should form a line to greet them. Hanju is surprised by this, until he sees the 2 immortals and finds them really cool. He even imagines himself becoming one of them someday. After all, that would be something truly great. Hanju also thinks that if he manages to get a first-class spiritual root, he might even become stronger than those 2. After that, one of the immortals says they are there to watch over the herb garden and tells everyone not to get in the way. The protagonist hears this and wonders where the elder is. The female immortal says a demonic cultivator showed up nearby, and the elder took leave, so the 2 of them were sent to look after the place in his absence. Hanju feels relieved, because before obtaining a first-class spiritual root, he still needs the protection of Elder Iron. The cultivation world is never a peaceful place, so Hanju hopes his luck will be enough to roll a quality spiritual root, so he can also have good self-defense. The next day, the protagonist prays to the god of fortune, asking to be granted an S rank, but fails. After that, he tries again the next day. But after a year of the same result, no matter which god he prays to, his luck never changes. 2 years pass, and still the protagonist hasn't gotten what he wants. He wonders how long this will last. He considers using a mid-grade spiritual root to start cultivating, but thinks that could be a huge waste and dismisses the idea, until he hears someone shouting that the elder has returned after being away for 2 years. Everyone gathers to welcome their leader, and he thanks them for keeping the place in order during his absence. The people say they were just doing their job, but the protagonist thinks they're nothing but suck-ups and says that no matter how much they flatter him, the elder won't give them any benefits. Then the elder calls Hanju and a few other boys. People ask why the elder called them specifically. Some assume they're being assigned to a specific role. However, the elder asks to see their hands, saying he'll take a look at each one's spiritual root. Hanju wonders why now, since it was the elder himself who forbade slaves from cultivating. The fact that he's going back on that now leaves the protagonist puzzled. But then he sees blood on the elder's robes, making him even more curious. Still, the elder insists on seeing his hand. Hanju realizes something is definitely wrong, and suspects the elder wants to turn them into pills to help heal his injury. But the elder sees that Hanju has no spiritual root and dismisses him, which makes the protagonist feel relieved, and even thankful he hasn't awakened yet. However, the next boy has a spiritual root in his hand, so the elder says he'll accept him as his disciple and train him. The boy gladly accepts the invitation, and the others praise the boy's luck, wishing they were in his place. But the protagonist thinks they're a bunch of idiots, and fears that the boy may never return once he passes through those doors. The immortal cultivation world is extremely cruel, and Hanju thinks that only with absolute power will he be safe, and he urgently needs to obtain a spiritual root to get started. Thus, another 3 years passed, and Hanju celebrates, because he finally awakened the spiritual root he always wanted. Now he doesn't want to waste any more time and wishes to start cultivating right away. However, he knows the elder is still watching, and not only that, ever since Zhangji was taken by the elder, he never came back. The protagonist believes the boy was turned into a pill, and thinks that if the elder finds out he's cultivating, he could be next. Until his system alerts him that he can create an isolated world that will allow him to cultivate far from prying eyes, which leaves him more than satisfied. So Hanju decides to test this feature, and commands his system to create the world, so he can finally begin his cultivation. After that, the world is created, where the protagonist is teleported, something that surprises him even more. Hanju was born immortal, and grew up in the sect loved by everyone, and although he was abandoned, he feels an unmatched destiny, and also carries talent within. He awakened the inheritance of a high-grade immortal emperor, and officially set foot on the cultivation path. Now he must choose his main path. Thinking about it, Hanju knows that the 6 paths of reincarnation should have some way to cultivate all 6 elements at once, and choosing only one would be a waste. But he concludes that the path of a sword cultivator must be the best choice, so he chooses that. Upon starting his cultivation, Hanju feels different. His body is getting warmer, and he feels full of energy. Once he starts cultivating, thousands of years could pass in an instant, impossible to reverse, so he must stay disciplined now that his attributes have evolved. The protagonist is faced with all the options and ends up completely lost. Hanju gets annoyed at the elder, thinking that after spending so much time taking care of his garden, he wasn't even rewarded. Not only that, but he also earned the old man's hatred, until he thinks maybe the elder's hatred is related to his parents running away, and not to him personally. Besides, in these last few years, the elder disappeared again somewhere, so Hanju figures he can cultivate in peace. so he doesn't want to waste any more time and wants to get started right away. The protagonist is determined to leave that place only after reaching the 9th stage of the Ki refinement realm. That way, he believes he'll be able to defend himself from the old man if needed. Are these light bullets the so-called spiritual Ki? Hanju can only feel the presence of wind, earth, wood, and water. There is no fire or thunder at all. First, he wants to focus on the 4, until his system alerts him that he can hide his cultivation, his spiritual root, and his potential. So he concludes that his system is finally rewarding him. Without a second thought, he chooses the second option. 2 years have passed since then. Hanju learned how to use Earth's spiritual Ki to feed the wood spiritual Ki and create a growth cycle, and also how to use water spiritual Ki to moisten the plants and wind spiritual Ki to clean the bad air. All of this to healthily cultivate his precious spiritual herbs. All of this contributed to further enhancing his growth. He even reached the 7th stage of Ki refinement by practicing these 4 types of Ki. While doing this, he's careful not to be seen by anyone. Soon he decides to stop working for the day. Over time, his appearance also changed, and the girls his age became enchanted by the fact that he's both attractive and a great cultivator. Hanju thinks that since he started cultivating, his charm attribute also began to show its effects. He's not sure if that's a good or bad thing, and even considers that maybe his system could help him hide that too. But in the middle of his thoughts, Immortal Xing approaches him and calls Hanju to talk. He knows that Xing Hongxuan has been staying there to guard the Elder's Garden, but she had never interacted with any slaves before. So Hanju wonders why she suddenly called him for a private talk. He asks his system to show how his relationship with her is, and sees that it's at 2 stars. Hanju finds that strange, since he's never interacted with her, and wonders why it's 2 stars. Then he remembers his charm attribute and thinks that might be it. But he's unsure since this could get him into trouble, yet at the same time, he's curious to know what it's about. Until Xing Hongxuan says there's no need to be nervous, and she just wanted to ask if he's willing to be a slave for the rest of his life. Hanju says no, because no one would want that, not even him, and he's only there because he was born a slave to Elder Iron. Then Xing Hongxuan asks for his help, and in return, promises to help him cultivate and free himself from his mortal identity. Hanju asks what kind of help she needs. The woman says she wants the Elder's alchemy recipe because she plans to deliver it to the demonic cult, and if Hanju proves to have good aptitude, she wouldn't mind becoming his Tao companion. However, what surprises the protagonist is the fact that she's part of the demonic cult. Moreover, the protagonist thinks that if he offends the Pure Jade sect, they would hunt him to the ends of the world. But if he refuses, he might end up being killed by Hongxuan, since she likely won't let him go now that he knows she belongs to the enemy sect. The protagonist realizes they are deep in the forest and Elder Iron is not in the herb garden, so there's no point in screaming. No help would come. However, Xing Hongxuan tells him not to worry, saying he doesn't need to answer now and she'll give him time to think it over. Hanju notes that both are at the 7th cultivation level, but he's never learned any magic and has no weapon, so he wouldn't be able to fight this woman. With no other options, he tries to dodge the issue and says he doesn't know the location of the item Xing Hongxuan wants. He also says there's the Elder's Attic, which someone like him, without cultivation, can't even approach. Xing Hongxuan says she knows the item is in the attic and claims that the Elder won't return there for a few years. As for the guards, she'll handle them herself and clear the way for the protagonist to get the recipe. To help him on the mission, she offers a pill, claiming it will unlock his spiritual root and help him move more easily. She claims it's a welcome gift, but the protagonist knows it's actually poison. Even so, he has no choice. He is forced to swallow the pill down his throat. Xing Hongxuan tells him not to worry and promises that after the text is completed, she and her husband will take care of preparing Hanju. After getting away from her, the protagonist tries to use his system to expel the pill, and with that, he manages to force it out. After that, he wonders what he should do, and whether or not he should listen to Xing Hongxuan. He knows people from the demonic cult won't stop at anything until they achieve their goals, and even if he helps, it might be worthless in the end. Then his system reveals that this has become a mission, where he can choose to help Xing Hongxuan or not. Regardless of the choice, he'll receive a reward. The protagonist is surprised by this and unsure of what to choose, but he says that he and Xing Hongxuan are incompatible. The day passes and night falls. Hanju is meditating in his room. Xing Hongxuan approaches and says she discovered the recipe is in the study room. She will distract the attic guards so the path will be clear and Hanju will have time. She also says the attic has a protective formation. If anything happens, the Elder will appear immediately, and the time to act is short. Hanju feels uneasy but heads toward the place. On the way, he sees the bodies Xing Hongxuan left behind, and thinks she really is brutal, wondering how she can kill someone so recklessly. Either way, the distraction worked, as the others went after Xing Hongxuan, leaving the path free. which impresses the protagonist since she acted so quickly. Just to be safe, he wants to act hesitantly for a bit longer. Upon entering, Han-ju tries to find the recipe as fast as he can, but the place is huge and full of items. Han-ju thinks that even though it would have been easy for Hongxuan to sneak in and look for the recipe herself, she insisted that he go through all this trouble. He also reflects on the inequality, since even the brush the elder uses to write is coated in gold, while the slaves can barely feed themselves. Then Shin Hongxuan shows up and asks why he's standing still when he should be looking for the recipe. The protagonist explains that there's a lot of stuff in there, and he doesn't even know where to start looking. But Sing Hongxuan tells him to say no more. She's already heard enough. She also says she killed several people today and wouldn't mind adding one more to the list. Han-ju tries to explain himself and begs her not to do that. But due to a careless move, he bumps into a shelf and a jar falls from it. Both are surprised to see what was inside. It was exactly the recipe Xing Hongxuan was looking for. The protagonist is shocked by this. He can't believe such a strange coincidence. On top of that, he wonders how the old man could hide something so important like this. He also thinks that as soon as Xing Hongxuan gets the recipe, he'll be dead. However, the opposite happens. Xing Hongxuan runs up to him and hugs him, saying the protagonist is her lucky charm and she never expected such a well-behaved person like him to be romantic. Han-ju doesn't know what to do since the recipe in her hands means the reward promised by the system is gone. He also notices that the woman's breathing is unstable, and he suspects she used a lot of energy on the guards, which makes him consider using this to his advantage. After that, the protagonist tries to strike her from behind, but Xing Hongxuan ends up sensing his movements. However, an explosion of energy occurs, and the recipe ends up in someone else's hands. The elder arrives and says this is outrageous, asking who dares to steal his recipe. Xing Hongxuan is shocked by the elder's presence and asks when he returned. Iron says he returned a while ago and was just waiting for her to make a move, since he saw the two together. He also says that for all these years, no one accepted such a mission, but these two did, so he felt something was suspicious. And now he affirms both will die. Xing Hongxuan realizes she fell into a trap. Besides, she has no energy left, having spent a lot fighting the guards. Now she won't be able to fight the elder evenly. If she tries, she'll lose. And there's no way to get the recipe from the old man's hands. The only option left is to escape. She jumps out the window but says this isn't over yet. After that, the elder praises her escape ability, saying that if not for that, Xing Hongxuan wouldn't have left alive. However, he looks at the protagonist who is still on the ground. Han-ju stands up, saying he almost died trying to hold off the witch, and is relieved to have his elder back. Iron asks if they weren't working together, but the protagonist says no and makes up a fake story for the old man. Even though it sounds absurd, the elder believes it, and the protagonist narrowly avoids being punished alone. Tired of all this, the old man just tells him to go to sleep. On the way, the protagonist's system sends an alert, saying that since he didn't help Xing Hongxuan, he successfully obtained the divine sword technique, and Han-ju celebrates as he finally receives something useful. 2 years pass, and he learned a lot about this technique. The protagonist thinks that even though it's not considered a sword, this technique is a magic spell, convenient when used to cut wood. He also says this will be the last time he cuts wood with this technique, as he intends to leave the garden because it can no longer help him in his cultivation. During these 2 years, he advanced the 4 roots to level 9. Now only the fire and lightning roots remain, so he needs to leave the garden. Han-ju takes advantage of the elder being away, and since no one can stop him, he wants to go after what he needs to keep evolving. The elder's level stagnated at stage 7. Not everyone can advance as easily as the protagonist. That's the difference in cultivation potential. Naturally, changes in environment are also equally important, both for the elder and for him, and he's leaving this place to extend his lifespan and become stronger than he already is. Han-ju looks at the place where he spent 20 years of his life and says goodbye, because a new life is about to begin. Since the garden is associated with the Pure Jade sect, even as a slave, he thinks he's considered a member too. Han-ju also thinks that unless he runs into Elder Iron, his identity won't be discovered by others. Upon arriving at the location, the guards demand to see his pass. However, the protagonist introduces himself, saying that he's not yet an official member, but being at the 9th cultivation level, he wants to know if there's still a chance to join the sect. The fact that the protagonist is at the 9th level surprises the guards, and they say they'll check with their superior. But the man himself shows up, saying he was nearby and heard everything, and if he understood correctly, a 9th level youth wants to join the sect. He is Yang Luo, one of the sect's guardians, and asks to see the protagonist's spiritual root, claiming that lately, some demonic cultivators, they tried to infiltrate the sect, and he just needs to make sure that's not the case. Han-ju gives a small demonstration of his power, and fires a ray of energy at a nearby mountain, something only someone truly advanced would be capable of doing. Yang Luo sees that this is a spell that matches what the protagonist said about himself, and unlike the infiltrators, the purity of this energy is very high. So he tells Hanju to follow him, as from now on he is an official member of the Pure Jade sect. The protagonist thanks him and apologizes for the inconvenience. He also asks how many disciples are in the outer sect and what the conditions are to enter the inner sect. Yang Luo says there are over 2,000 in the outer sect, and only those who reach foundation establishment can enter the inner sect. In addition, every 3 years the sect holds a competition, and the top 3 receive foundation establishment pills, which help refine those at the 9th level. Since it's very hard to win the competition, Yang Luo says that even he doesn't know how many are in the inner sect or what happens there. Then the protagonist asks if the Pure Jade sect has places to cultivate fire and thunder spiritual Kai. Yang Luo is surprised by the question and assumes the protagonist must have those roots, but says that in the outer sect there are no such places, only in the inner sect. He also says that if Hanju has a thunder root, he could appeal to the council, and maybe they would make an exception and let him into the inner sect due to the rarity of that root, since having a root like that is usually enough for the sect to personally nurture someone. The protagonist then reveals that he indeed has the thunder spiritual root and asks for help in speaking with the council. He also says that if he enters the inner sect, he won't forget Yang Luo's kindness. That way, Yang Luo agrees to help and says he'll arrange a meeting with the council to talk about it. After that, they go to the sect office, and Yang Luo introduces the young 9th level cultivator who wishes to join the organization. Soon, the person in charge asks to check the protagonist's spiritual root. Meanwhile, Hanju tries to analyze the old man, but can't see his cultivation level and wonders if he's at the foundation establishment realm. If that's the case, Hanju is afraid of being found out. He has 6 high-level elemental attributes, and it would be bad if they were discovered, so he asks his system to hide them. Then Yang Luo says the protagonist has the thunder root, a very rare one, and that alone should be enough for him to enter the sect. So he asks the protagonist to demonstrate his power. With that, Hanju reveals only that he has 3 spiritual roots, keeping the others hidden for now. This way he is accepted into the sect and also receives some items that all members get. Yang Luo says he will report everything to the first elder, and when the elder is back, he will take Hanju to the inner sect, but for now, tells him to rest. Unintentionally, the protagonist receives special treatment and hopes that doesn't become a problem. Next, he finds a good cultivation spot and wants to train his fire ki before the elder returns. Normally, cultivators work with only one technique, and many cultivation methods are specific to a single element. But someone with 6 attributes like the protagonist needs to work hard to make progress. Fortunately, he has 3 high-level roots that make up for this gap. He only felt the sensation of becoming more powerful. More precisely, the feeling of his life expectancy increasing. From the moment he saw the attribute panel for the first time, there was only one thought in his mind: to live a long life. Because in his past life, he didn't take care of his body and stayed up late online. In the end, he died young from cancer and realized the value of life. He knows there might not be a third chance, so he doesn't seek fame or fortune, much less beauty. He just wants to live a long, good life. After some time, Yang Luo returns and says the first elder has come back. But as soon as he sees the protagonist, he's surprised and asks if he was really cultivating in his room that whole time, because he feels a powerful aura coming from him. Hanju comes out of his cultivation state and only then realizes that 6 months have already passed. After that, the protagonist goes to greet the first elder. The elder's substitute says that Hanju's fire root has improved a lot since their last meeting. Yang Luo says that he didn't leave his room even for a minute, and believes the protagonist could even become an elite disciple. The elder says that Hanju's temperament is good, comparable to that of an inner sect disciple, and almost equivalent to an elite disciple. He also says that if he wants to join the inner sect, he will need a master. Currently, 18 elders are available, so if any of them accept him, Hanju can become their disciple. Otherwise, he'll only be able to join by participating in the outer sect competition and working hard to reach foundation establishment as soon as possible. Hanju understands the elder's instructions and goes out in search of a master. The first elder says that the other elders from each peak have different personalities and cultures. Some are competitive, others are discreet, and some go on missions. So he asks what kind of training the protagonist would like to take part in. Hanju says he prefers to be discreet and doesn't like crowds or being too well known. Then the first elder says that the serene Jade Peak might be what he needs. Flying on a giant gourd, they head to the peak, and he affirms that for sure, Hanju is going to like the place. Above them, a few birds fly as well, and the protagonist is amazed by the view, as he notices that the birds are enormous. Not only that, but up ahead is the peak the elder mentioned. There, he can see cultivators flying on swords. But the first elder says that the protagonist doesn't need to be envious, since he'll also learn to do that during the second inner sect trial. He shows him the location of the pure jade sect's inner sect and says the protagonist will be able to receive missions, collect his salary, and also trade. Hanju is surprised, as he had underestimated the sect's power, but now realizes the place is far more grand than he imagined. He ends up getting distracted, and the elder warns Hanju to be careful, because if he falls from there, even at the 9th level, he will die. After a while, they finally arrive at the location. The protagonist says that of the 18 peaks, this one is the lowest and most deserted. The first elder says this peak can be considered the most modest. He also says the elder here is Fairy Xaixuan. Her level is unfathomable, and she also enjoys cultivating in seclusion, as she prefers silence. In addition, she forbids her disciples from developing feelings for one another or becoming Dao companions, which is why everyone there is isolated. However, to the first elder's surprise, Hanju thinks that's great and says this peak is perfect, as he also shares those ideals. The elder is startled, but praises the protagonist's commitment regardless and believes he'll be someone who will still surprise them. After arriving at the main hall, the first elder introduces Hanju as a solo cultivator who also has a triple spiritual root, one of which is the Thunder Root. He also says they talked on the way about this place being quiet, and the young man confirmed he likes that, so he asks what the fairy thinks. In response, Xaixuan asks if he is willing to join the Serene Peak and not concern himself with worldly matters, focusing solely on cultivating with all his strength. Before answering, a girl says that finally the Serene Peak has a decent little brother. She is Changyu, and the protagonist sees through his system that she finds him attractive, but only has 2 stars, so he wonders if his charm is really that bad. However, he ignores her and says that as long as there are no restrictions, he can enter seclusion and not leave for 100 years, so her favorability drops to 1 star. Xaixuan finds the answer interesting and tells him to attack her, as she wants to see his skills. If that's the case, the protagonist says he'll go all out. Then he uses his magic ability and attacks Xaixuan with his key sword. She, however, shows no reaction. Unlike Changyu, who admires him even more, the protagonist is alerted by the system that Changyu's favorability toward him has increased to 2 stars. And in Xaixuan's case, his ability generated good feelings. Her favorability is currently at 1 star. Next, Xaixuan asks if that's the only ability he has. Hanju responds that it is. The fairy says the ability isn't bad, and from now on, he will remain at the Serene Jade Peak. Thus, the first elder prepares to leave, saying he won't disturb them any further and that he looks forward to the protagonist's achievements. But as soon as he leaves, Xaixuan stares at the protagonist with a terrifying expression. What he doesn't understand is why. Then Changyu says she's waiting to be greeted as master. So Hanju bows and gives the most exaggerated salute possible, something that even the master herself thinks was unnecessary, since only an emperor receives such an honor. Regardless, she tells Changyu to take her junior stepbrother to be registered, and also tells her to help him settle into his cave dwelling. Changyu obeys and even asks if he knows how to fly on a sword. Hanju says no, but he wants to learn. Meanwhile, his new master thinks that his appearance and temperament are excellent, and his character isn't bad either. Outside, Changyu formally introduces herself and says the protagonist can also call her senior sister. And since he's a newcomer, he can come to her whenever he has questions. Hanju thanks her and says he won't cause trouble. He also says he'll help her if she ever needs him. So Changyu thanks him for his kindness and thinks she must protect him and not let anyone bother him, because she believes it's hard to find such a good boy around here. Changyu has been there for about 5 years, and during that time she's been searching for someone like him. She feels it was worth the wait to find him. On the other hand, the protagonist thinks this peak is different from its reputation and wonders why all the female disciples seem like hungry wolves. Soon after, they arrive at the cave. Changyu says that's where he'll be living and says her cave is right next door, and he can use the space to cultivate as much as he wants. Hanju thinks the inner sect has really surpassed his expectations. Since he started cultivating, this is the first time he's felt intimidated. The deeper his cultivation gets, the more he senses the imbalance. The difference in power between him and his master is enormous, and that makes him anxious, as she is a nascent soul cultivator, a level beyond his imagination. Previously, the first elder said the difference between the inner and outer sects is immeasurable, and even though he is strong, he only became the first elder of the outer sect. A cultivator absorbs the spiritual key of heaven and earth directly into their dantian, turning it into energy that transforms the cultivator into a human cauldron of power. As far as Hanju knows, only the founder of the sect is someone beyond the nascent soul realm, but he left more than 10 years ago and has yet to return. That means Fairy Xaixuan is the strongest cultivator he has encountered so far. He wants to trust her because until he can protect himself, He'll have to depend on her. Out there, many dangers exist, and living safely is his goal. But for now, the protagonist wants to cultivate his fire spiritual foundation, and since he has excellent support, he'll do his best not to disappoint her. Until his system sends an alert saying that due to recent events, he has two options: gain leadership of the peak but offend the fairy, or remain discreet and earn her recognition. Both paths will lead to a reward, and it's up to the protagonist to decide. He thinks that doing his best to earn recognition should be a good thing, and finds this master quite strange. After 3 years of cultivation, Hanju concludes that it's time to learn how to fly on a sword, as it will be easier to move around the peak. He thinks the technique is pretty easy. He already has talent with high-level swords and could easily learn it just by watching. Claiming this is the advantage of possessing high-level providence, unlike those who use safety nets around their swords. Then his master calls for him. She says it's impressive that he spent 3 years in isolation just cultivating. Hanju greets his master and says he needs help with something. He says he's already advanced his fire and wind to level 9, but now he'd like to do the same with his thunder spiritual foundation. Saixuan asks if he wants to cultivate a triple key foundation. He says yes, but deep down he knows he actually has 6 paths. However, his master says she can't help. This leaves him speechless. The protagonist asks why not. The fairy says that specializing in 3 paths is very difficult, and she warns that he'll face a strong tribulation in the future. She also says the time invested would be a waste. Hanju realizes that makes sense. Having those spiritual foundations comes with its own cost, but he thinks his master doesn't expect him to have his own methods. So he says he understands his master's reasons, but believes that with determination, he will reach his goal and would like to try anyway. Therefore, Saixuan says he can use the teleportation formation of the inner sect and go to the Thunder Spirit Well. He thanks her and says he will go there right away. Upon arriving, Hanju says that the sect is generous, and he didn't expect the well to be like this. He had imagined something more like a fish pond. Even from this distance, he can feel the intense thunder spiritual kai emanating from the other side, so he decides to take a closer look. He then sees that the well and its purity are immense, and if he cultivates close to the center, his thunder key will jump straight to level 9, much faster than the others. He also notices that someone else is cultivating in this place, which confirms that the thunder spiritual root is indeed rare. Then someone approaches and tells him not to walk inside the well. He must cultivate only around it, otherwise he'll be struck by lightning and die. The protagonist screams from the scare, and the man asks why he screamed. After all, shouldn't someone be honored to see a man as handsome as him? Hanju makes up some random excuse and sees that it's a tree spirit and imagines that the sect must have spent a fortune to have one nearby. A spirit like that is also called a cultivation catalyst treasure, and even though it looks like a demon, just cultivating near it doubles your efficiency. The protagonist even imagines what he'd do if he could plant one of these, but for now, he wants to start cultivating since he's in the right place. He thinks that starting from scratch, it will take about a year to reach level 9, until the other cultivator hears this and becomes curious. He says that's impossible, since someone with such low purity wouldn't be able to do that in such a short time, and concludes that the protagonist must be arrogant. However, a year passes, and he takes back what he said after witnessing it with his own eyes. For his part, the protagonist knows that the day has finally come. His 6 cultivation paths are complete, and now he can move on to foundation establishment. His master had been worried that the heavenly tribulation would be too strong if he cultivated multiple spiritual foundations, but she didn't know that his cultivation method is different. It involves splitting the tribulation. Even the tree spirit notices that the thunder tribulation for advancing through foundation establishment has begun. The other cultivator is unsure, but the tree says the protagonist shouldn't ascend there, because the well will act together with the tribulation and double its power, and warns the cultivator to step back to avoid damage. It also says that the protagonist can't be saved even if they wanted to help, because the tribulation cloud has already been triggered. Just as the tree said, clouds charged with lightning begin to gather, and some strike toward the protagonist. But when he's hit, he takes no damage, which surprises everyone around him. Hanju says he will use the lightning's energy for his foundation establishment, and so he does, becoming surrounded by lightning energy. The other cultivator asks what kind of method that is. The tree isn't sure but knows that somehow the protagonist succeeded. 2 years later, as he leaves the well, the protagonist is questioned about the time he spent there. Initially, he intended to strengthen his cultivation after his breakthrough, but reaching the 3rd level of foundation establishment was a surprise even to him. His life expectancy is now nearly 200 years. Staying alive definitely makes him feel good. Looking at his system, he wonders just how much his master enjoys cultivating in secret. Then the other cultivator appears and says that in just 2 years, the protagonist reached the 3rd level of Foundation establishment and is now among the best in the entire sect. With that, he introduces himself as Mo Fuchao of the Heavenly Thunder Peak and asks for the protagonist's name. Hanju introduces himself and thanks him for the compliment, also mentioning that he's from the Serene Jade Peak. Mo says joining that peak is a waste of talent and invites him to join Thunder Peak. The protagonist thanks him for the invitation but says he has already acknowledged Fairy Swan as his master and guardian, so he cannot abandon her. Mo Fuchao says he understands but leaves the invitation open and tells the protagonist to think about it. However, Hanju notices something strange and gets startled. In another place far from there, some men are searching for Xing Hongxuan under the Elder's orders. While hiding from them, Xing Hongxuan thinks that she finally managed to free herself from the lower viridescent cult and wonders where to go now. She knows the problem is her identity. She'll be hunted wherever she goes. She also knows that if she wants to change her life and become a better person, there's only one person who believes in her, since that was the first time someone ever protected her, and that person is the protagonist. But while thinking about him, a talking bird reveals her position. Aware of the danger, Xing Hongxuan is startled and flies upward, leaving the men behind. Back to the protagonist, his system issues an alert about Xing Hongxuan and gives him a summary of what happened to her in recent years. He's surprised she's still alive. They haven't seen each other again, so Hanju wonders why his system says that Xing Hongxuan still has affinity with him. The system's complexity and origin are unknown, but the protagonist doesn't think the system wishes him harm. Even so, he has many doubts about it. Either way, he thinks it's better to keep cultivating, until suddenly he hears the sound of a bell and steps out of his cave to check what happened. Outside, his fellow disciple greets him and says they both must go see their master together. She hasn't seen him in a while and realizes that since the last time, Hanju has made a lot of progress. Changyu quickly thinks she doesn't want to fall behind and must train hard to stay at the same level as him. Otherwise, she won't be able to protect him like she promised. In a hurry, she says she has no time and explains everything to the protagonist on the way. After that, Changyu explains that Serene Peak normally never rings the bell. When a bell is rung, it means the master wants to meet with all the disciples. But in all these years, this is the first time it's ever happened. That's why Changyu hadn't mentioned it before. The protagonist thinks this might be troublesome. Even so, he goes to meet the master, and there, everyone is already speculating about what might have happened. However, as soon as Hanju arrives, his appearance draws everyone's attention. Some are even surprised because they've never seen him before and wonder where he's been all this time. Then a disciple steps up to greet him and asks if he's Hanju, the master's newest disciple. The protagonist says yes. The disciple introduces himself as Liu Sangxin and says that many affairs of the peak are handled by him, since the master likes to stay reclusive most of the time. He also says that Hanju can come to him if he ever needs anything. The protagonist thanks him for the kindness. Next, the fairy grabs everyone's attention and says that the Grand Elder has decided that the 3 lowest ranking peaks in the fighting competition must choose 10 disciples to fight against the lower viridescent cult, a cult that has been sending spies to plot against the Pure Jade sect. But this time, the Grand Elder has decided to strike back. Judging by the older disciples' expressions, Hanju feels like he shouldn't be too concerned, but he wants to know if sending the 3 peaks is meant to help or to kill the enemies. Haixuan says she doesn't care about the rankings, but since this issue involves enemies of the sect, she advises everyone to pay close attention to their missions. Liu Sangxin is confident, since the sect leader recently developed a program to train exceptional disciples, and they are the Pure Jade sect's trump card. Not only that, but he's also confident that someone important like him will be chosen to participate. However, the saint names Hanju as the chosen one. She says he joined the peak only recently, but has already proven to be a prodigy and reached unparalleled levels, so he's the right choice for the training. Such a decision leaves all the other disciples speechless, as they believe the better choice would have been a more senior disciple, not a newcomer. Even the protagonist himself disagrees with the master's decision, and says his wish is only to stay at the peak and cultivate quietly. Besides, he believes this opportunity would be better for someone more experienced than him. He thinks the master might suspect he's a spy, which is why she's sending him to the training, and he concludes that it's better to be safe than sorry. Since he refused, the fairy offers the opportunity to Liu Sangxin and tells him not to cause any trouble, though she remains thoughtful about Hanju's reason for refusing. Later, Liu Sangxin thanks the protagonist for his support and says he'll help him with anything in the future as repayment. Hanju's system notifies him that his affinity attributes with Liu Sangxin have increased. Then Changyu appears and says she'll take care of the protagonist in Liu Sangxin's absence. He then thanks her for the support. Liu Sangxin wishes Hanju good luck, Then Changyu mentions that the protagonist has cultivated for so long that he's never taken a sect mission, so she asks if he needs a guide. But the protagonist asks if he can skip that. Changyu says that cultivating in a cave takes too long, and doing missions helps with cultivation progress, but Hanju says he doesn't need that and prefers to keep things as they are. Still, Changyu says completing missions helps earn contribution points that can be exchanged for pills. However, Hanju uses the excuse that he's afraid. So Changyu asks how he can be afraid of death while being a cultivator, but the protagonist replies by asking why she's cultivating at all if she's afraid of death. Changyu loses the argument and decides to leave him alone, calling him a coward. Meanwhile, the fairy concludes that the protagonist is not a spy from the lower cult, but rather a rogue cultivator. Even so, he lacks neither resources nor talent, so she thinks it's better to observe him a little longer. 10 years pass after that, and the protagonist returns to the Thunder Well. The tree encounters him and says it once thought Hanju was a prodigy, but asks how he's still only at the 3rd level of the Foundation Establishment realm. Hanju doesn't know exactly how to answer, so the tree says the waters of cultivation are deep, and he won't be able to endure them. Although the tree can only see up to the 3rd level, Hanju has spent 400 spiritual stones just to cultivate his other spiritual bases to the 5th level. He knows his true level and thinks he needs to use as few spiritual stones as possible to fully cultivate his thunder spiritual base. After that, Mo Fuchu appears and greets him. The protagonist asks who the person behind him is, and Mo Fuchao introduces her as his younger sister from his clan. Her name is Mo Zhu, and the girl asks why Hanju is still at the 3rd level, since from her brother's description, she thought he was stronger. Hanju simply says he's about to start cultivating, as he can't take too long or it'll cost more spiritual stones, so he tells him to cultivate farther away. Mo Zhu thought that a prodigy her brother had his eyes on would be capable, but even after all these years, she hasn't seen any development in Hanju. On the other hand, she says she used only 10 years to advance 2 levels, and thus concludes that she can be considered a true prodigy. However, her brother tells her to take a good look, because the spiritual key around Hanju is being absorbed rapidly. Mo Fuchou also says that the absorption speed is faster than his, something he doesn't understand, since he's at the 9th level, far above Hanju. He deduces that Hanju is using a different cultivation technique, and that he has an exceptional aptitude in his spiritual foundation. His sister hears this and asks why Hanju's level isn't increasing. Mo Fuchou concludes that somehow, Hanju is hiding his level, meaning he could be above level 9, and possibly the strongest among them. Thus, the protagonist's system alerts that the favorability of Mo Fuchou and his sister toward him has increased to 2 stars. 8 years of cultivation pass, and Hanju's Thunder Spiritual Key finally reaches the 9th level. He asks to be teleported out of the well, and says it's time to collect his salary since it's been a while. The tree realizes that the protagonist had been hiding his information all this time, and offers him an opportunity to gain lots of resources. Hanju asks if it's dangerous. The tree spirit says that fortune often comes with risk, so the protagonist declines and simply walks away. Shortly after, he wonders if, whenever there's a hint of danger, it might be better to just receive his salary regularly, and decides it's better to enjoy the job instead. Wherever he passes, he ends up drawing female admiration. Hanju concludes that having too much charm is definitely problematic, and he can't even run from it because he's stuck in a line. Then suddenly, Mo Zhu appears and says it's a coincidence that they've run into each other. She also says she needs his help, claiming it's a great opportunity. It hasn't been long since the protagonist last heard the same thing, which makes him a bit suspicious. Mo Zhu still insists that this is an excellent opportunity, and she's sure Hanju wouldn't want to miss out on a chance like this. She even says that if he does everything right, getting rich won't just be a dream, and there could be additional rewards as well. However, the protagonist tells her to calm down, and apologizes for not being able to help her, saying he needs to return to his cultivation. The girl becomes furious at being rejected, but when she realizes she's already talking to herself, Hanju hides as he doesn't want to be followed, until he hears some girls passing nearby, and they're even talking about him. They're praising his looks, just like everyone else, and even comment that he's more handsome than the last winner of the sex competition. Hearing that reminds the protagonist of the competition. He had been so focused on his cultivation that he completely forgot about it. So he runs straight to his master. When he arrives, Hanju apologizes for missing the competition, but the fairy tells him not to worry, as there will be other opportunities in the future. On the other hand, she asks why Hanju is still at the 3rd level, since he's been cultivating so much. She also knows that's not his real limit. Hanju feels flattered and tells the truth, claiming that he's actually at level 9, but has been keeping it hidden to remain discreet. Then the master says that if everyone there cultivated like him, Serene Peak would be the strongest in the sect. He says he doesn't do anything special and just likes to cultivate, Then the protagonist's system alerts that he received a reward for maintaining discretion until now. Next, he also realizes that someone else has joined the conversation. When he looks to the side, he sees his former elder, Old Iron. This completely takes Han-ju by surprise, and a tense atmosphere settles in the air, until the elder recognizes the protagonist, and Chang-yu asks if they already knew each other. The protagonist says it's something like that. The fairy introduces Han-ju to Iron, saying he's her newest disciple, and says that Han-ju can call Iron his brother, but the protagonist wouldn't even dare. For his part, Iron realizes that the brat he once knew really did become the fairy's disciple. Iron thinks the boy didn't even have a spiritual root, and over those 20 years, the old man did everything he could to advance in level, yet in the same time, the boy reached level 9. But upon seeing his expression, Chang-yu asks Iron what's going on. She says her brother Han-ju is the prodigy of their peak and that she won't allow anyone to harm him. The master interrupts the conversation, and since Han-ju likes cultivating so much, assigns him a mission to guard the realm of 10,000 demons belonging to the Pure Jade sect. Chang-yu says that's where the sect's beasts are raised, and she asks to accompany the protagonist on this journey. However, the master refuses, claiming the place is too dangerous, which makes the protagonist wonder why she didn't hide that information. The fairy tells him not to worry. Each peak will send one disciple. The tie in the place is dense, making it perfect for cultivation, but due to the risk, caution is needed. Han-ju didn't even get a chance to refuse, and he feels uneasy. Even so, he agrees to go. Then the master tells him to prepare and have someone taken to the realm later. Chang-yu accompanies him to his cave, very worried about her junior brother. Meanwhile, the master tells Iron that she doesn't want to hear anything about his past with Han-ju, and that from now on they are fellow sect members and should get along well. She also says that knowing Han-ju, he wouldn't harm the old man, and declares that he will be the core disciple of the entire Serene Peak. Iron is greatly surprised by this. His feelings are a mix of frustration and fear, but he knows the boy earned it. 6 months later, already in the realm of 10,000 demons, the protagonist has cultivated every day since arriving. His Wind spiritual foundation reached the 6th level, while the others remain the same. He's feeling bored and decides to consult his system. But as expected, nothing good came from accepting that opportunity. However, he sees that Moju was recently attacked, though all he can do is wish her well. Then it's time to patrol, and Han-ju decides to practice the 7 illusory steps along the way. Previously, Chang-yu warned that although the realm of 10,000 demons is a good place for cultivation, he should patrol from time to time, to prevent the beasts from going into a rage and causing problems. Right after that, the protagonist comes across a cat, and says that the beasts in this realm don't seem dangerous at all. Then he turns his back and starts walking away. At that moment, the creature that looked like a harmless cat transforms into a fierce beast and attacks. However, the beast doesn't attack the protagonist, but instead strikes a puppet created by him. Han-ju is smarter than the enemy. He thinks that was a close call, but thankfully he mastered the 7 illusory steps. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to dodge that attack. Han-ju says that this beast is not ordinary and that he must take it seriously. Each level of the 7 illusory steps can create 1 additional clone, and if he reaches the final level, the user can create up to 7 clones. This not only increases the user's speed, but also confuses the enemy. While moving, Han-ju talks to his clones, saying that they need to work together to win. Then he surrounds the beast and uses the Peerless Divine Sword. With movements coordinated with the clones, the attacks come from many different directions, leaving the enemy with no chance to escape. Even wounded, the beast manages to flee, because among the clones, only the real one can cause damage. Otherwise, the creature wouldn't have had a chance to survive. Luckily for him, the beast only had speed and didn't attack, but he wonders what the origin of that beast is, since it managed to pass through the restriction spell. Thinking about it, he concludes that recently, the beasts have been getting enraged more frequently, and he decides it's better to report the situation. The matter is brought to the masters, and they suspect that the lower cult may be involved. They also suspect there may be a traitor among the higher-ups, and perhaps it would be best to send more disciples on patrols. The Taoist Immortal of Thunder says the issues involving the sect master's disappearance and the appearance of more beasts should be investigated properly. He also says that so far the fairy hasn't spoken up and asks if she's thinking about something. Xenixuan only says that she'll leave the matter in their hands. Then the Thunder Immortal asks if she has any idea what's happening beneath the surface of the sect's talent program. He also says that if there is a traitor, the fairy is the only one he trusts, but Xenixuan replies that she cultivates in silence and only has a superficial idea about all this, but she also says that she trusts him too, since they were both trained by the same master. After that, they conclude the meeting, deciding that they'll send more disciples to help guard the realm of 10,000 demons. 2 years passed, and after that, Han-ju concludes that the restriction spell cast in this realm is definitely a good thing, because it works well as a resting stop while patrolling and cultivating, and as long as he's within it, there's no need to worry about the outside, until someone approaches and asks if the protagonist is using the realm of 10,000 demons for cultivation. Hanju says yes, but he soon realizes someone managed to enter his magic circle, and wonders who this person is. Only a cultivator above the Golden Core realm could do that. But the man tells the protagonist not to be alarmed, and claims he is also a disciple of the Pure Jade sect, sent to protect the realm of 10,000 demons. He also notices that, to the naked eye, the protagonist appears to be at level 3, but by observing his breathing rhythm, he realizes the protagonist is actually at level 9. Sensing the protagonist's nervousness, the man tells him to relax and asks if he's there on his master's orders. Hanju says his master, Fairy Xaixuan, sent him. The man then asks if his master gave him any specific mission. The protagonist says that even if she did, he shouldn't be going around telling people. So the man understands that he prefers to remain discreet, and asks if the protagonist knows what kind of trouble he's gotten himself into. The man walks off and tells the protagonist to follow him for the sake of his master, claiming that he can help him handle it. Hanju checks his system and sees that the man's name is Li Qingzi, and he's not a simple disciple like he claimed. He's actually the sect master, and he's also in love with the fairy. Further ahead, Li Qingzi says that the beasts there are prone to rage, and all of those beasts are subordinates of the white dragon tiger. It loves revenge, and this time, the tiger has summoned many beasts to prepare for a rebellion. With that, Li Qingzi asks what the protagonist did, and how he managed to provoke the white dragon tiger. However, Hanju can only think about how disgusting it would be to see Li Qingzi with his master, claiming he doesn't deserve her. In any case, Hanju says he didn't provoke the tiger. Li Qingzi finds that strange, but probably believes that the lower cult is behind all the chaos, and the protagonist just got dragged into it accidentally. He also asks what kind of techniques the boy is using to be faster than the tiger. Hanju says he picked up the movement technique during his journey. Either way, Li Qingzi says the priority is to deal with the beasts, and that he needs to start by getting to the root of their fury. Hanju asks if Li Qingzi is trying to get him killed, but Li Qingzi says no because he believes the boy has potential to face the tiger, and he wouldn't do that if he were dead. He also says that the reason his master sent him was to allow the protagonist to earn merit, and since Hanju's abilities are far from simple, Li Qingzi knows the boy has plenty of tricks up his sleeve and asks if he'd like to tame the tiger. However, Hanju tells Li Qingzi to find someone else because he just wants to cultivate in peace. But Li Qingzi says he will trap the tiger and help the protagonist handle the pressure, and if he manages to tame the beast, he'll be rewarded with the sect's supreme technique. With that, the protagonist's system issues a mission alert, and says he can either accept or reject it. Both choices have consequences, but the rewards offered don't interest Hanju, so he refuses. This leads Li Qingzi to ask why the fairy chose a disciple like the protagonist. Li Qingzi doesn't understand how someone can refuse an opportunity like this. He also says that in the end, he has to carry the whole burden. Then he senses the presence of the Demon King approaching. The beast charges at Li Qingzi in anger, but he doesn't back down before it, and thus begins a battle between them. Not far from there, Chang Yu walks with company. The master said the beasts there were enraged, so she needs to find Hanju quickly. Soon after, her companion senses something strange up ahead. Then they're both shocked by what they see. Several trees have been cut down, and apparently, a peerless sword technique was used for it. Shortly after, she finds the protagonist, and says she's there under the master's orders. The other young man introduces himself as Manhwa, and says the master found out about the beast's rage, so she sent the two of them to support the protagonist. Manhwa also mentions the trees and asks what the protagonist knows. Hanju says that some beasts surrounded him, and luckily, an elder showed up to help. Right away, Manhwa realizes the situation there is truly dire. In that case, he decides to look around the area, and tells Chang Yu to stay and rest. Along with Hanju, Chang Yu says the master is worried about his safety because she learned about infiltrated spies and ordered everyone to stay alert. With that, Hanju realizes it's no coincidence that the previous mission warned he might attract the attention of the lower cult. He also suspects that may be the reason Li Qingzi showed up, and concludes that the situation is more delicate than it seems. Soon, the protagonist suggests leaving the realm of 10,000 demons, but Chang Yu says that would be the same as abandoning their post. Manhwa returns to the area all wounded and asks if the protagonist forgot to activate the restriction spells. Hanju says he didn't forget. He activated them all. Then Manhwa thanks him, but says he just encountered a powerful beast and nearly died. With that, the protagonist says that beast must at least be at the Golden Core realm. Manhwa says he saw a group of beasts, and they were all being captured by someone. He ran away, but ended up running into another beast. Changyu realizes they've only just arrived, and one of their own has already been attacked, which shows this place is truly dangerous. So she understands why the protagonist suggested abandoning this place, and thinks he's lucky to not have even suffered a scratch, until she senses the presence of beasts very close to their shelter, and says they must be the target. With such a large number of creatures like that, Manhwa says restriction spells won't be enough to stop them. For his part, the protagonist asks why they don't just run away already. Changyu says that this place is under Serene Peak's jurisdiction, and if they flee, they'll be abandoning their post without permission. Hanju then says they can stay if they want, but he's not planning to die right now. Manhwa agrees with him, and says each of the 18 peaks has its own area to manage, and they won't be the only ones under attack, and as long as they're alive, there's still hope. They flee, and the pavilion is destroyed, but the beasts don't stop. Soon Changyu says they might not even be the target. Manhwa says they could just be passing through, but wonders what the lower cult is planning. The protagonist senses that one of the beasts is different and has a monstrous aura, and to his surprise, the creature appears behind him, trying to attack. Hanju realizes it's a beast at the Golden Core realm. He also sees that Meng has run away and left the two of them behind. Changyu is scared and warns the protagonist about danger coming from above. While Hanju holds her, he also notices the beast birds. Upon seeing one of them approach, Changyu thinks this is the end for her, but the protagonist uses his triple shadow sword technique, a technique he received after rejecting the sect master's offer. Each sword has a different kai. The swords are powerful, and this technique can be activated continuously until the user runs out of spiritual energy. So under the sword's command, Hanju orders them to slash the enemy. After the danger passes, Changyu is in a state of shock. She asks herself how this is possible. She just saw in action the Dan beast at the Golden Core realm, and says that if she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed it. Besides that one, there were still 6 others. However, all of them were wiped out in a matter of seconds. Not to mention, the protagonist had a cold expression she can't forget, and she wonders if he's still the same guy she met some time ago. On top of that, she now finds him even more handsome and powerful. Hanju returns and says today's haul was fruitful. He took all the valuable things from the beasts and plans to trade them for spiritual stones. Changyu asks if they're really going to leave. Hanju says yes. This incident can be considered a special circumstance, and if needed, he'll take full responsibility. Sometime later, they use teleportation to return to their peak. Manhwa arrived there first and greets them, saying he's very happy they survived. However, Changyu greets him with a kick to the face, saying it's because he ran off and left his companions behind. The protagonist tells her to take all the time she needs with that, and he'll meet her later, after exchanging the items for spiritual stones. On the way, Hanju realizes he'd never thought about this before. He was worried that the number of spiritual stones wouldn't be enough to fully cultivate Foundation establishment. Now he thinks some good days are ahead, and suddenly feels like going back and hunting beasts again, all just to get more rewards. Previously, Changyu said that the demon realm was created to nurture the beasts. Under normal circumstances, killing them is forbidden, but this time was an exception. Hanju concludes it's best to remain discreet and cultivate as always, and he can earn stones little by little, since the amount he has now is enough. After a while, they go to the master, and she asks why the 3 of them have returned. The protagonist summarizes the events and says he had no choice, begging his master for forgiveness and saying he's willing to accept any punishment. The fairy then asks if he'd accept being banned from cultivating for the next 100 years. Just hearing that makes Hanju freeze, but Changyu steps in to defend him and says this situation had nothing to do with her younger brother. She says they were attacked by beasts and were left behind by Manhwa. Saixuan says that the 2 are weak and only slowed Manhwa down, and having 1 trusted person return alive is better than 3 dead. She also says Saixuan didn't violate any sect rules and everything she did was for her own safety. Now she tells the 2 of them to leave because she wants to speak to Hanju alone. The protagonist starts wondering what the master is going to do. He thinks he might be under suspicion again, and if that's the case, he doesn't know what to do. Then Saixuan says that Hanju has been cultivating for so long and asks what's the reason behind such behavior. Hanju hesitates but says his wish is to obtain immortality. However, the fairy says that even cultivating in seclusion, it's impossible to become immortal without an opportunity. The protagonist believes that only those without talent look for opportunities, but he has an unparalleled spiritual foundation and also high-level providences. His master says she arranged an opportunity, but unfortunately, Hanju ran from it. Above all, his cultivation technique is unfathomable, which makes it impossible for her to help him. So she suggests that he have his own spiritual well in his cave. Besides Thunder spiritual ki, there are also other types of spiritual ki. Hanju asks where it is. The fairy says it's close to Serene Peak, but he can only receive it if he secures one of the top 3 positions in the inner sect evaluation. The protagonist understands that this is a fight and asks if it's dangerous. His master tells him not to be afraid of fighting. It's not like he'll die from it. He asks if there will be any participants at the Golden Core realm. The fairy says no, because anyone at that level is already a core disciple, elder, or deacon. So Hanju understands that all participants are cultivators at the same or similar level as him, and with that, he agrees to participate. He then thanks her and says he'll earn that exclusive well, affirming that he'll do his best to bring respect to Serene Peak and his master. In response, Swan says Hanju is an arrogant brat who's not easy to deal with. After that, the protagonist goes to the spiritual well, and the person in charge demands 100 days of cultivation, requiring upfront payment in spiritual stones. Hanju thinks that, according to his master, there are still 8 years until the inner sect evaluation, so he needs to use that time to cultivate as much as possible. He also knows he needs to spend carefully, and even during his cultivation, he wants to train his wind spiritual foundation to perfection and save some spiritual stones. On the way, some girls admire his beauty, but the protagonist calls them vulgar, thinking they don't even understand the joy of cultivation. As expected from the sect, they have all types of spiritual wells. The environment of the wind spiritual well is much better than the thunder one. The protagonist thinks he must make sure all 6 of his spiritual foundations reach level 9 before the inner evaluation, until suddenly, something catches his attention. Some cultivators are surrounding someone and mocking him. The boy in question is being pressured by the others and is nearly getting beaten by all of them over some kind of internal dispute. Hanju realizes that, as always where there are people, there are problems, and he just wants to focus on his cultivation. But then, his system issues an alert, and says it has identified an innate providence, and asks if Hanju wants to investigate its origin. Back to the oppressed boy, some ask how he dares to cause trouble near the spiritual well, and if he's not afraid of being punished by the disciplinary hall. The boy says that recently, the demonic cult has been active, and trash like them keeps creating internal conflict. That's why he believes they are enemy spies. The other cultivators call him arrogant, but he tells them to be careful. His name is Zhou Fan, and his origin is quite terrifying. Hanju sees everything through his system and wonders whether he should help the boy or not. His mind is torn because while he wants to help, he also thinks it could be a bad idea. So Hanju concludes that the best thing to do is to continue cultivating and leave it alone. With that, 8 years of cultivation pass, and the protagonist decides to stop, since the inner competition is about to begin. But then, he notices something. Zhou Fan, the boy from before, is near a girl, and his expression is far from pleasant. The boy is clearly frustrated. The girl apparently just rejected him, leaving Zhou Fan heartbroken. The protagonist watches all of this and thinks it's because of things like this that he focuses only on his cultivation. He's not interested in getting headaches from stuff like that. Hanju was about to leave, but Zhou Fan calls out to him, so he asks what he can do for the boy. Zhou Fan says he's from Thunder Peak and heard many stories about Hanju from his brother Mo, and that's why he always wanted to meet him. But the protagonist doesn't like this and wonders why Mo would do that. However, the biggest surprise comes when Zhou Fan kneels on the ground and asks for advice on how to win over his childhood crush. Since Hanju is popular with girls, the protagonist thought the boy was going to challenge him to a fight or something like that, and wasn't expecting this at all. For his part, Zhou Fan insists on being guided. So Hanju tells the boy he should let go of everything, because as a cultivator, he shouldn't be tied down by love. He also says that once he attains the Great Tao, the world will be under his control. Until then, he'll naturally be able to get whatever he desires. Hanju adds that the boy has never even seen him near a woman, and once he understands this step on his own, he'll achieve perfection. Zhou Fan's eyes light up with awe after hearing that. But Hanju thinks this kid is a fool and says that appearance is everything. That's why Zhou Fan doesn't have the same success with women as he does. Sometime later, the bell rings, and all disciples are summoned, apparently something related to the inner sect evaluation. In the middle of this, Liu Sangson appears and greets the protagonist, saying it's been a while since he last saw him. Liu Sangson also wants to take the opportunity to ask a question. He then asks if the protagonist knows a girl named Sing Hongshuan. Just hearing that name, Hanju is startled and wonders how Liu Sangson knows. Hanju tries to dodge the topic and asks Liu Sangson what his interest in that woman is. Meanwhile, several thoughts race through his mind. All he wanted was to stay in seclusion and cultivate in peace, but it seems ghosts from the past are coming back to haunt him. Liu Sangson says that when she was younger, Sing Hongshuan was forced to swallow a poison pill and threatened into becoming a spy in the Pure Jade sect. He also says that she always hated the demonic cult and even tried to find an antidote from one of the alchemists in the outer sect. She also did an outstanding job and was able to distinguish right from wrong, and chose the correct path. After that, she received refuge from the sect master due to her contribution, and the master even made an exception and accepted her as a disciple of the inner sect. Sing Hongxuan is currently on the main peak, cultivating under the guidance of the sect master's younger sister, Taoist Jingxu. Earlier, when Liu Sangxin met her, she asked him to look for someone named Han Ju, a former servant of one of the outer sect's alchemists. And Liu Sangxin says that, coincidentally, one of the disciples from Serene Peak is also named Han Ju. With that, the protagonist concludes that this woman really has come to ruin everything. So he admits that he's the person Sing Hongxuan was talking about, but justifies himself by saying he had no choice. But Liu Sangxin tells him not to worry about it because he knows Han Ju's talent. He also says their peak is lucky to have him rather than another peak, and affirms that as long as he remains in Serene Peak, he'll receive their full support. Suddenly, Han Ju feels guilty. He never imagined Sing Hongxuan had such a hard life, but even so, he still thinks it's best not to meet her. Upon returning to his peak, the master says the evaluation is about to begin, and each peak needs to send at least 10 disciples, so she asks who wants to volunteer. Several of her disciples step forward to go. Manhwa appears, saying that it's because of the reward. Aside from inheriting the flowing jade technique, the winner will receive 500 spiritual stones and an ice spirit. The protagonist notices that Manhwa didn't mention anything about a special innate cave and concludes that's a reward being offered privately by his master. Since everyone is excited, Han Ju decides to blend in and also volunteers to participate. As soon as he raises his hand, the master selects him for the first seat. Han Ju tries to argue that he was only showing support for the others, but she says that doesn't matter, and besides, the first seat doesn't carry much responsibility. After selecting everyone, the master dismisses them and tells everyone to leave, except Han Ju. The others are curious about what their conversation is about, but they obey the master and leave. Alone with Han Ju, the fairy says that his cultivation has increased greatly, and she had underestimated him before. She also says that even with 3 spiritual foundations, his cultivation speed is still the best in the pure jade sect. Han Ju thanks her and says it's all thanks to his master's guidance. However, Xuan says she doesn't remember ever teaching him anything, and affirms that his cultivation and sword technique are excellent, but they're not techniques from the pure jade sect. She also says that Han Ju possibly had another master before, since he was already cultivating diligently soon after joining the peak. Moreover, she doesn't believe he has any intention of harming the sect, and recently someone testified that he was part of the outer sect when he was younger. Xuan says that it's alright and she won't investigate him any further. She just wanted to discuss these matters to inform him, and claims that no one will judge him for his past. However, to avoid unnecessary problems, Xuan declares that from now on, Han Ju will be her personal disciple. That information catches him by surprise. Then his system alerts that his status within the sect has increased, and because of that, he was rewarded with the 9 Dragons Demon Expulsion Seal. Thus, Han Ju thanks his master and wishes her a long life. Before he leaves, Xuan gives him the symbol of a personal disciple, and tells him to keep it safe. After leaving, the protagonist uses his system to inherit the seal he received. Next, he says that this magic is similar to a palm technique since it can be cast with the hand and even produces varied effects. Han Ju has another trump card, but the problem is he's not very proficient with it yet, though when combined with the techniques he already has, he concludes he won't have any trouble as long as he's not attacked. But his master warned that there are no restrictions on the techniques used during the battle, and since his techniques are quite destructive, he wants to avoid using them. After that, Chang Yu appears and says the evaluation is coming up, so she asks if the protagonist feels confident. Han Ju asks how she got into his cave. Chang Yu says it's a secret, and since this is his first time participating in the evaluation, she wants to take him somewhere. The master is concerned that he might not know the rules, so she sent Chang Yu to explain them. She says that all 18 peaks have set up an arena. The disciples from each peak will participate in duels in a knockout tournament until the top 10 are chosen, and then they'll compete within the inner sect, where the entire sect will be watching, and for Han Ju's evaluation, he will be fighting at Tianzhu Peak. With that, the protagonist asks if the whole sect will really be watching. Chang Yu says yes, and asks if he's aiming for the top 3 in the ranking, affirming that with his strength, he could definitely achieve it. She now needs to return to the master, and wishes him luck in the competition. Alone, Han Ju thinks this could be a good opportunity and wishes to fight discreetly, because he doesn't want to attract attention. However, breaking all expectations, Sing Hongxuan suddenly appears out of nowhere and surprises the protagonist. Han Ju immediately says she shouldn't sneak up on people like that. For her part, Sing Hongxuan says she made a promise to him and never imagined they'd meet again there, attributing it to fate. Han Ju says that last time he had no choice. After all, if he didn't obey her, he would have died. However, Sing Hongxuan tells him not to worry about that anymore. She says he didn't betray her, and if it weren't for him, she wouldn't be alive. Sing Hongxuan heard from others that Hanju is at the 9th level and asks if it's true. The protagonist says he's almost at the 9th level and getting close, but since the evaluation is near, he won't have enough time to cultivate. Coincidentally, Sing Hongxuan says she has a pill suited for high-level cultivators that helps boost cultivation. Then she shows the pure jade pill and says that since she's not going to use it, it's better to give it to him. Hanju doesn't want to take the pill, but Sing Hongxuan says she can get another one whenever she wants. Since she's currently cultivating with Taoist Jingsu, her master is a good person and he doesn't need to worry about her. Sing Hongxuan also says that Hanju needs to work hard in the inner sect evaluation and admits that back then, she didn't know he was a prodigy. She also says that her own aptitude is average, but if there's anything she can do to help, she'll do her best. Then she teleports away, leaving the protagonist behind still completely confused. In another place, not far from there, Sing Hongxuan meets with her master. Taoist Jingsu knows that her disciple gave the pill to a boy and asks if she regrets it. Responding, Sing Hongxuan says no and admits she's already fallen into the traps of love. Her master asks if that's just because he's handsome. Sing Hongxuan says that's reason enough for her, but her master doesn't think it's worth her disciple helping him. However, Sing Hongxuan disagrees, claiming that Hanju's aptitude is incredible, unlike when she first met him, and now he's at the 9th level. Taoist Jingsu finds it strange that she's never heard of someone so talented before, so her disciple says that Hanju is discreet, and even the sect master doesn't know much about him. Then her master starts to judge Hanju as someone interesting and states that she'll keep an eye on him. Speaking of him, the protagonist is impressed by the number of spectators, because he thought there would be just a few on each peak. However, a true crowd has gathered to watch his fight, and he doesn't know how to react to that. His system displays a mission window. Complete the fight in exhibitionist mode or in discreet mode. Both offer different rewards. Hanju realizes that the option suggesting discretion may be related to his past decisions. He then says his system knows exactly what he wants, and that he prefers to live a long life rather than live in the spotlight, choosing to remain discreet. Then it is announced that the first round between Hanju from Serene Peak and Lu Renjia from Tianzhu Peak is about to begin. The Mo siblings are in the audience, excited to watch the match. Mo Zhu believes in the protagonist's potential, claiming he will surely win. But contrary to all expectations, instead of fighting, the protagonist simply dodges the incoming attacks. His opponent thanks him for being lucky enough to face a weakling right off the bat, but says fighting someone like him is no fun at all. The entire audience starts finding the fight boring, and some even leave. The Mo siblings are also disappointed, as they imagined a completely different outcome. However, Mo Fuchao believes the protagonist is doing it on purpose and still thinks he will surprise everyone. For his part, Hanju is already tired of pretending, and now that the number of spectators has dropped, he wants to finally end it. Even the match judges are bored, so he concludes that this is the best time to act. His opponent says he's been bored up until now because he fought someone who didn't attack and only dodged, but now he wants to end it once and for all. But when he attacks, the protagonist dodges faster than before, and with a single strike, ends the battle. After being hit, the opponent is unable to get up, and the protagonist is declared the winner. Mo Fuchao asks why he didn't win from the start. Hanju says it took time to find his opponent's weakness, but Mo Fuchao knows that's nonsense. The few rounds he fought after that were all the same way, and not many people were watching, even the judges were bored. Afterward, Mo Zhu gets the feeling that she's being avoided by the protagonist, but her brother says Hanju's intentions are obvious. He's a skeptic and doesn't want his cultivation to be hindered by love. Mo Zhu asks if there's any point in life if he continues cultivating that way. Her brother says everyone seeks something different, and Hanju's goal is immortality. His sister says he and Hanju are quite alike, but Mo Fuchao disagrees, claiming he wouldn't stand a chance against him. The protagonist thinks that until now he's only defeated his opponents after the crowd had already left, but it will be hard to keep his abilities hidden from now on. He also doesn't believe that Zhou Fan made it into the top 10, and his priority now is to grow stronger in case something unexpected comes his way. Hanju looks at some leaves and finds it strange that they aren't moving. He also doesn't feel any breeze, so he wonders where the sound of the wind is coming from. He definitely realizes that something is wrong. Then he decides to use the 9 Dragons Demon Expulsion Seal, sensing that a demon was indeed lurking. Hanju tells the demon to give up and attacks it with his magical sword technique. A powerful magical explosion occurs at the scene, until the demon begs not to be attacked anymore. Hanju realizes the creature has intellect and says that's all the more reason to finish it. But the being reveals itself and says it is the great elder of the Pure Jade sect, and asks why Serene Peak has a barbarian as a disciple, someone who doesn't respect elders. The elder says he was just passing by, and it's not fair that he was suddenly attacked. Hanju asks why he was moving in such a creepy way. The old man says he takes that form when cultivating his divine powers, and asks what that insane spell was that nearly extinguished his primordial spirit, saying that not even his true body could withstand such power. The protagonist simply says he needs to report this to his master, and warns the elder that he might scare someone to death moving around like that at night. However, the master insists that he must not report it, so Hanju asks if he knows his master. Actually, Hanju's master is the disciple of the old man, just like the current sect leader, so the protagonist says he'll pretend nothing happened. But before leaving, the master says that Hanju's foundation is incredible and asks if he wants to inherit his legacy. Hanju asks what legacy that is. The master says it's the celestial constellation Golden Body and asks if he wants to learn it, claiming that in the entire sect, only he and the current leader know about it. Hanju thinks it's amazing, but refuses the offer. Irritated, the master leaves. The protagonist then goes to his master and tells her everything. He also says he almost killed the old man, so he found it odd that he acted so kindly afterward, which is why he refused. The fairy says the old man is being reckless again, so she will go talk to him about it. She also says that if he dares to show up again, she'll deal with him herself. Before leaving, Hanju asks if that technique is really powerful, because the way the old man talked about it, it sure seemed like it. However, before cultivating it, the disciple would need to sever one of his foundations. The protagonist asks which foundation that is, and awkwardly, Hexaixwan says it's the thing that makes him a man. Hanju realizes that the old man didn't have good intentions, but that also means he and the current sect leader severed their foundations. His master orders him to keep that a secret. After that, Hanju understands that, like him, the veterans are avoiding women, but the way they did it was quite extreme. The next day, the battle for the top 10 in the evaluation is about to begin, and the entire sect is ready to watch. The protagonist knows it will be difficult to stay low-key in front of so many people, so he wonders if he should just go all out and defeat his opponents as fast as he can. While deep in thought, Changyu appears, saying that everyone from their peak came to support him. Hanju thanks her and says he'll do his best, but from afar he sees his future opponent, none other than Zhou Fan. Mo Fuchao told Zhou Fan that his biggest rival in this evaluation would be Hanju. They are both from the same peak, and his friend said Hanju is hiding his true strength, which could rival the elite disciples. But Zhou Fan says he has a powerful trump card and that his opponent might not even get the chance to defeat him. However, he is surprised by what he sees next, because Mo Zhu is cheering for his opponent. This sparks a rivalry between her and Changyu. Changyu says the girl should grow up, because at her current age, she doesn't stand a chance with Hanju. But to the surprise of both, a third party suddenly arrives calling for Hanju. Immediately, both girls turn their attention to Xing Hongxuan, asking who she is to show up out of nowhere like that. The protagonist is caught in this crossfire and thinks this might be divine punishment. Then, the Taoist master appears to start the match, and announces that the first round between Hanju and Zhou Fan is about to begin. Both of them are gaining fame as they are considered prodigies of their respective peaks. Seeing the protagonist surrounded by so many girls, Zhou Fan asks why he said all those things before. Hanju tries to explain, saying he had no choice and that this situation is terrible. But Zhou Fan's anger only grows. He says that this time, the protagonist will have to fight for real, and states that Hanju will have to give it his all if he wants to win. He even says he'll let Hanju strike first. Since that's the case, the protagonist agrees. Then the Taoist master authorizes the start of the fight. Hanju gets ready to attack, saying he'll bet everything on this strike, and tells his opponent to prepare himself. Zhou Fan thinks he should have the advantage since he has a natural Dharma treasure, but for some reason he feels uneasy and fears his fate might be grim. Previously, Mo Fuchao said that in some aspects, he's much worse than Hanju, as Hanju is a subtle person who follows a simple rule. Those who are pleasant will be competitors, otherwise they're enemies. He also said Hanju has a lot of potential and is a model to follow, but Zhou Fan refuses to accept this and believes his destiny is to defeat Hanju, as he wants to prove his worth in front of everyone. He still holds a grudge for having been rejected in the past, and he wants to make that girl regret judging him wrongly, claiming she made a mistake by doing so. Back to the fight, Zhou Fan uses his spiritual Ke to create an absolute defense field. Zhou Fan says he doesn't care how talented Hanju is, because he believes that today he will crush him. From the audience, Mo Zhu says that Zhou Fan's treasure is really powerful, and he was even accepted as his master's disciple because of it. Changyu defends the protagonist, claiming that Mo truly knows nothing about him, and there's no chance her stepbrother will lose. But what happens next surprises everyone, because Zhou Fan's defense didn't stop him from getting hit. He was struck only once, and that was enough to end the fight. Soon, Hanju is declared the winner, and everyone is shocked by how fast the fight ended. Changyu says that's exactly what she was talking about earlier, and she celebrates Hanju's victory. Mo Xiu sees Zhou Fan receiving medical attention, and Zhou Fan, in turn, realizes that not only did he lose, but his opponent also went easy on him. After that, the Taoist master says that the top 5 has been decided, and now they will draw lots for the next matches. He also says the 4 remaining people will fight each other, and whoever draws the red stick won't fight in the next round. The protagonist's luck makes him draw the red stick, and with that, he goes straight to the top 3. He also remembers that his master said the top 3 would receive a personal innate cave dwelling, so now that he's in the top 3, he has secured his reward. After Hanju is chosen, the other 4 participate in the semifinal. However, neither of the 2 matches was anything special. Since the audience had seen the protagonists fight, they wanted something just as thrilling. In any case, the Taoist master says the top 3 has been determined and will now announce the rules for the final rounds. But before he can do that, the protagonist raises his hand and says he's dropping out of the competition. As an excuse, he says he used all his energy in the last battle and is still recovering, so he's willing to accept 3rd place. This takes everyone by surprise, including the Taoist master, but he agrees to give 3rd place to the protagonist and says he will receive the reward according to his placement. The crowd goes wild at this decision, and Zhou Fan starts to think that maybe he wasn't that weak after all, since it took so much effort to defeat him. His admiration for Hanju grows, but he has no idea what really happened. The protagonist receives his rewards, and among them, he gets a rogue capable of withstanding a strike from a Soul Formation Realm cultivator. Seeing so much enthusiasm, the Taoist master asks if the protagonist dropped out on his master's orders, but Hanju says his master had nothing to do with it. Anyway, they arrive at the main peak hall. Upon arriving, Taoist Jinxu congratulates the 3 of them as they become elite disciples of the sect, and as a reward, they can choose their private caves. The caves are located in the mountains surrounding the 18 peaks, and the 1st place gets to choose first. But due to the remote locations, she emits a light orb that will guide them there. Afterward, everyone will be able to oversee the lands where their caves are located. With that, the 1st place picks the cave with Fire and Wind spiritual key, claiming that it's the most suitable for him. The 2nd place picks the cave with Water, Fire, and Wood spiritual K. Then Taoist Jinxu says the remaining cave belongs to Hanju, and it contains all types of mixed spiritual key, and it's as abundant as a spiritual well. Hanju thinks there's no luck greater than this and thanks her, claiming he's extremely satisfied. Upon seeing the protagonist, Jinxu thinks that her disciple was right about him and concludes that the protagonist's potential is truly impressive. And now that all the caves have been chosen, she says everyone can head to theirs. On the outskirts of the Pure Jade sect, at the edge of a forest, there is a mountain with a water spring. There is a small crack in the mountain, and a vibrant light emanates from it. The crack seems ordinary and extremely narrow, only wide enough for 1 person. However, after walking a few steps, it suddenly opens into a cavern with vast, flat land and majestic houses. The cavern soil is fertile, with a beautiful spring, mulberry trees, and bamboo plants surrounding it, and its owner is trying to wear clothes that make him look like a foreigner. Hanju sees that the numinous treasure rewarded by the system is far from ordinary. It's very light, transparent, and has powerful defense. The protagonist doesn't feel any different after putting it on, but he knows that its defense is so strong that even an expert at the nascent soul realm wouldn't be able to hurt him. This gives him a sense of security he's never had before, so he believes he can now focus and cultivate at ease. Besides, this time it will be hard for anyone to come looking for him. Hanju carved a sentence outside to let others know the place already has an owner. But what the protagonist doesn't know is that he's about to receive a visitor. Mo Fuqiu and Zhou Fan searched for the cave all day until they finally arrived. Then they see the sentence the protagonist carved outside, and they're sure it's his cave. The sentence truly matches its owner, so they announce themselves, saying they want to see Hanju. The protagonist asks what the reason for their visit is. Mo Fuqiu says the sect recently dispatched several missions involving the demonic cult and asks if Hanju is interested in helping wipe them out. Zhou Fan adds that their investigations found out the enemies have many pills that can help with cultivation. However, Hanju says he's not interested in going out right now, as he needs to go into seclusion for a breakthrough, so he wishes them a good mission. With that, Zhou Fan asks if Hanju intends to break through to the Golden Core realm. Hanju says yes, and that now he needs to cultivate in isolation. But Mo Fuqiu tells him to wait, and says that breaking through to that level will be difficult. He also says the heavenly tribulation this time will be more terrifying than the one for the Foundation Establishment realm. Then Mo Fuqiu says that if they go on the mission together and find those pills, Hanju can keep them all. Mo Fuqiu thinks that if he wants to persuade the protagonist, he has to talk about things related to cultivation, since cultivation also requires enablers. A person can't progress without help, and looking at Hanju, He concludes that his frustrated expression says it all. But what he doesn't know is that the protagonist was distracted with his system and saw that the reward for accepting the mission isn't worth much. Even though Mofusho tries every way to convince him, Hanju refuses once again, saying he's not interested. He also says that if the sect ever faces trouble in the future and needs his help, he will definitely assist, but right now, he just wants to cultivate in peace. After the protagonist refuses, Jo-fan looks confused and says he doesn't understand these prodigies. He also says that Hanju might be strong, but he's a coward. Mofusho agrees, saying that a person shouldn't spend their whole life in seclusion. He also says that if one wants to cultivate, they should fight for opportunities and believes sooner or later, Hanju will come to his senses. Jo-fan says that it's hard to get resources by just cultivating in isolation and believes he'll become stronger than the protagonist once he gets his elixirs. Jo-fan's biggest goal is to surpass the protagonist no matter what. Meanwhile, Hanju receives a reward for having refused the mission and earns a small universe belt, which can be used as a storage item. 2 years later, all 6 of the protagonist's spiritual foundations reach perfection, and now he can advance to the Golden Core realm. Hanju thinks he can't be reckless, because only 2 or 3 out of 10 Foundation establishment cultivators manage to break through successfully. Apparently, the heavenly tribulation of the Golden Core realm stirs a person's inner demons, and he thinks that if he fails, he'll be killed by the heavenly tribulation, or he might end up going mad because of his inner demon. While meditating and trying to focus, the inner demon asks what the protagonist desires. It also says he's strong enough and can stop hiding. If he shows the world his strength, he could defeat anyone and even rule for ages. However, Hanju mocks these words and asks if that's all an inner demon can offer. He also says it's terrible at choosing targets. With that, the inner demon is eliminated, and now Hanju can go all in and make his breakthrough, until he looks toward the outside of the cave and sees that a powerful storm is approaching. Then he activates the 6 paths of reincarnation, along with the divine robe of the golden mystic cicada. Soon, an enormous surge of power is unleashed. 7 days later, he receives a notification from the system, saying that because he advanced to the Golden Core realm, he obtained an unparalleled magic sword. In addition to the Killing Sword, the protagonist's lifespan has increased, and now he wants to set a new goal for himself, to reach the nascent soul realm within 100 years. And if he surpasses 100 years of life, he'll consider it a loss. But before continuing to cultivate, he wants to check his personal relationships. However, when he checks his system, he sees that while he was cultivating, the demonic cult attacked several times. So he concludes that he might not be safe even within the Pure Jade sect, and he also wonders how his master is doing. Soon he decides to go see her, but is shocked by what he sees along the way. Since many sect disciples are injured, and some places are partially destroyed, Hanju never imagined that in the time he spent cultivating, all of this could have happened, considering his sect is known as one of the strongest. Changyu sees that the protagonist has finally come out of his cultivation state, and says that the master asked him to go see her. Immediately, the protagonist goes to the ferry, and says that after the inner sect evaluation, he rushed into cultivation and hadn't seen her since, so he apologizes. Tairixuan says it's good that he decided to return, because she thought Hanju had betrayed the sect. She also says that their situation is critical, and the sect is about to face a disaster like never before. Because of that, Xaixuan says she has something to offer Hanju, and states that if he wants, now is the best time to lead the sect. The protagonist is completely caught off guard by this offer, because that's not what he wants. He sees that his system has issued a mission alert, saying that he has the option to lead the sect or stay, and both choices have their rewards. Hanju asks what will happen to his master. Tairixuan says that she will live and die alongside the Pure Jade sect. Then Hanju says that if that's the case, as her disciple, he'll do the same as his master. Then the fairy asks if Hanju isn't afraid of dying. He thinks that he is afraid, but he has the divine robe that protects him from everything. He sees in his system that Tairixuan's affection level toward him has increased by 3 stars, so Hanju says that with 1 more, she could become his Tao companion. However, he lets that go since it goes against his original plan, and tells his master that eventually everyone will die. He also says that life is precious, but it depends on each person whether it will be one of achievements or mediocrity, and even though he seeks longevity, he doesn't want to abandon his master. Still, he thinks that unless he's facing a ruthless opponent, he'll definitely prioritize saving his own life. Although Xaixuan is his master, she says that she never taught him anything, and claims that Hanju doesn't need to do this for her. The protagonist says that even so, his gratitude for her is deep, since she gifted him with many opportunities. She also helped him solve several potential problems, and throughout his journey, the master has been the one who treated him the best in this world and never caused him trouble. The master thanks her disciple for his thoughtfulness, but says that things won't become too serious just yet. Chang-yu says that in fact, the wise master feared Han-ju's fear of death, which is why she asked him to leave. Saik-swan feels sorry for not having taught him anything until now and wants to make up for that, so she says that Han-ju can cultivate with her just like Chang-yu. However, the protagonist says she doesn't need to worry about that, but the fairy gets irritated because he refused her guidance. Anyway, she says that Han-ju can leave now. After that, she tells Chang-yu that they need to get there first. She also tells her to help Han-ju according to the plan, and everything is in the storage pouch. After a while, Chang-yu goes to the protagonist's cave and says that the master asked her to place spiritual formations and plant spiritual herbs. This is to increase the spiritual kai in his cave, since the spiritual formation is made of red stone, which needs to be infused with spiritual power to be activated. This formation can hide the cave's entrance. If someone tries to invade, they will be trapped in an illusion and unable to escape. Chang-yu also says that the spiritual grass doesn't require care and increases the surrounding aura. Han-ju never imagined that she had all of this. She says that even though she's not that good at cultivation, she has experience in alchemy, talismans, spiritual formations, and exorcism. Han-ju thanks her for the help. But Chang-yu says there's no need to thank her, because soon she'll be living with him. Han-ju doesn't quite understand why, and asks if she's interested in the spiritual key of his cave. Chang-yu is left speechless, and the protagonist doesn't know how to react. Then Chang-yu snaps at him, saying that all Han-ju ever thinks about is cultivation. 5 more years of cultivation go by, and Han-ju's thunder spiritual root rises 3 levels in the golden core realm. The fairy told him that the sect master is definitely having a hard time and frequently investigates the demonic cult. Things also got worse for Mo and Jo, so the protagonist is thankful he didn't go with them. Then he receives a system alert saying that a bearer of innate providence has been detected, and asks if Han-ju wants to check its origin. He accepts and sees it's Chen Sanchen from the demonic cult, a core disciple of the enemy and one of the oldest. Han-ju was only able to detect him because of his system, which shows that this man is dangerous, but he believes that if he's alone, he has the advantage in combat. Outside, Chen Sanchen reads the sentence written on the cave door and says everyone from the Jade Pure sect are cowards. But stopping to think, he wonders why there would be such an elaborate inscription in the middle of the jungle. Then he starts to suspect it might be a dwelling cave, but he doesn't see an entrance. Inside, the protagonist hears everything and doesn't like being called a coward. Now that he's confirmed the enemy is alone, he wants to welcome him properly. Then Chen Sanchen senses a killing intent nearby. But before he can do anything, he is attacked without even seeing where it came from. The protagonist struck him with the triple shadow sword. Chen Sanchen wonders what kind of technique this is, one where he can't even counterattack, so the only thing he can do is beg for his life. The protagonist asks why he came to the Jade Pure sect. Chen Sanchen says it's a misunderstanding and he was just passing through. But in his thoughts, he wonders who he's dealing with, since he investigated everything beforehand and none of the Jade Pure sect elders have such power. This suggests that Chen Sanchen believes he's facing the great leader of the Jade Pure sect. Then the protagonist approaches and says he knows Chen Sanchen is from the demonic cult and asks what would happen if he handed him over to the sect leaders. Chen Sanchen is surprised that this young man is so powerful and knows everything about him, so he insists that it's all just a mistake. Meanwhile, Han-ju wonders if he should hand over the enemy to his sect, or maybe keep him as a bargaining chip in case the sect master gets captured in the future. After that, Chen Sanchen steps forward and places a blade to the protagonist's neck. He believes this young man is merely a disciple of some elder, because only someone more experienced could have attacked like that, and he says that the elder should let him go, or he'll kill his disciple. But the protagonist says he doesn't have any disciples. Chen Sanchen pretends to be crazy, but thinks this must be a disguise, and if that's the case, he'll never be able to escape. He also imagines that to be capable of subduing him and discovering his identity, the elder must be an expert. Seeing this, the protagonist wonders if that's all an enemy disciple is capable of, and also questions whether Chen Sanchen is too weak or if he himself is just too strong. Either way, he lets the enemy go free. Han-ju concludes that he can't capture him against his will, so he needs to find another way to make him stay. Then he reveals the entrance of his cave to the enemy, which leaves Chen Sanchen quite impressed. The protagonist had been planning to hand him over to his master, but he knows Chen Sanchen will try to escape at all costs, and he might have no choice but to kill him, since he doesn't have the strength to restrain him. Also, Chen Sanchen won't dare flee because he's overestimating the protagonist, so Han-ju tells the enemy to strike him with all his strength. Chen Sanchen then concludes that the elder is just looking for an excuse to attack him. So once again, he apologizes and insists that he was wrong, but Han-ju keeps demanding to be attacked, saying that sooner or later, he'll do it anyway. Chen Sanchen says he wouldn't dare attack him and even offers to worship him. So Han-ju says that from now on, Chen Sanchen will stay there to help him plant spiritual herbs and clean the house, and the enemy agrees. After a while, plants were planted and sown throughout the cave. In the midst of this, the protagonist resumes his usual cultivation. Chen Sanchen thinks that the elder must really enjoy cultivating, since he hasn't left the cave even once since he arrived. For a whole year, Chen Sanchen remains there and thinks that at this rate, the information he needs to report will be delayed. He is the most senior disciple, and if he doesn't return, it will attract the attention of the leaders of his sect and his master. So he wonders if he should ambush the elder, since he cultivates so carefreely, giving the perfect opportunity for it. Chen Sanchen thinks that if he were stronger, he wouldn't be in this situation, and that frustrates him greatly since he considers himself the formidable demon of the demonic cult. But as he tries to attack, the protagonist notices. He quickly covers it up, making an excuse that he was just killing a mosquito. Although he tries to hide it, Hanju's system alerts that Chen Sanchen's hatred toward him has increased to 4 stars. The protagonist thinks that this situation keeps repeating itself for an entire year, but he never harmed Chen Sanchen, and to keep an eye on him, he hasn't left the cave. Even so, Chen Sanchen's hatred continues to grow to the point that at any moment he wants to fight to the death. Chen Sanchen, for his part, just wants a chance to escape, so he can bring the members of his cult to destroy the Pure Jade sect together. And when that day comes, he wants revenge for the suffering he endured for an entire year. However, something takes him by surprise. Chen Sanchen is struck directly by the protagonist's triple sword. Hanju says he gave Chen Sanchen enough chances to change, and affirms that if he had at least stayed obedient, he could have been a valuable hostage. With that, the protagonist suspects that Chen Sanchen has some way of signaling his death to his superiors. And if that happens, they'll want revenge on whoever killed him. It's a vicious cycle. Kill the small one and you'll see the big one. Kill the big one and you'll see the elder. And after that, an even greater elder will descend from the heavens. It doesn't take long for this to come true, because through Chen Sanchen's body, an elder older than him appears, summoned by magic. He says his disciple is dead, and asks if whoever killed him has the courage to say his name. The protagonist says his name is Keo Tao, and asks who the old man is. He introduces himself as Zhang Kunmo of the demonic cult, and tells Keo Keo to prepare for his death. Hanju sees through his system that Zhang Kunmo has developed 5-star hatred toward him, so he realizes this enemy will be difficult to handle. Only a soul formation realm cultivator could face this elder, so he concludes it's better to contact someone from the sect to help. Even so, that doesn't stop him from continuing his cultivation, and 8 years pass. Xing Hongxuan comes to the protagonist's cave, intending to pay him a visit. Hanju is startled because not only Chang Yu, but even Xing Hongxuan can enter his cave, so he starts thinking the defenses are just for decoration. He asks what the purpose of the visit is. Xing Hongxuan reveals that she has more cultivation pills, and says that these are sect pills she has been saving all these years, so she tells him to feel free to use them all. But the protagonist tells her to take them all back, because he no longer needs pills. Xing Hongxuan asks why. Hanju says she is in the 3rd level of the Foundation Establishment realm, and should use the pills for herself. With that, Xing Hongxuan realizes that Hanju is far more advanced than she thought, but he asks Xing Hongxuan to keep that to herself. The protagonist says he needs to work hard, or else, after a few hundred years, he will become immortal, and all that will remain of the people he knows will be their bones, and Xing Hongxuan's deep love will be his eternal punishment. Through this, Xing Hongxuan understands, and says she won't hold him back anymore. She also says that for now she will let him cultivate in peace, and will arrange to get some golden core cultivation pills that match his current level. However, Hanju says that's not what he meant. Far away, at the headquarters of the demonic cult, some skulls decorate the place, and a meeting takes place among the leaders. Duan Tongshan, leader of the Yuanying Peak, asks if Lei Qingzi still hasn't been captured after all this time. Zhang Kunmo says that Lei Qingzi must have intentionally avoided returning to the Pure Jade sect and is likely diverting the numbers. So he suggests just ignoring him and attacking the Jade Pure sect, but the others don't share his opinion and ask the leader what they should do. Duan Tongshan says they shouldn't rush, and that they've already invested too much in Chen Sanchen. Now that damage has been done to the rival sect, he doesn't want to hold back. He's about to break through to the Soul Formation realm, and if he succeeds, the fight against the Jade Pure sect will be an easy victory. Such information surprises everyone, because they see that their leader is extremely confident. Duan Tongshan says he's been preparing for decades. However, he's only 90% confident and needs to wait 30 more years to get what he wants. To them, 30 years is nothing, so everyone agrees to wait and have their revenge. They say their rivals better enjoy the little time they have left, because their destruction is coming. After that, 10 years passed, and the protagonist feels himself growing stronger every day. He also feels like he's achieving wonders, and that the nascent soul realm is close. He's super happy, since all his attributes have evolved greatly. But in the middle of his celebration, Changyu shows up to visit him. As always, the protagonist is startled by her sudden arrival, but Changyu says she was the one who built the cave entrance, so she can come in whenever she wants. Besides that, she brought some treasures that can be planted in the well to further increase the spiritual tie in the cave. Hanju thanks her. However, Changyu says it's all thanks to their master. She's just helping with the manual labor. She also says that ever since Hanju went into seclusion, the Serene Peak has received some new disciples, and reveals that Brother Iron, Hanju's old acquaintance, unfortunately died. The protagonist is shocked, but Changyu says that Iron's qualifications were very weak and his lifespan had run out. But before dying, Iron wanted to see Hanju. It was his last wish. Hanju asks why Iron wanted to see him. Changyu says she doesn't know, since they weren't close. Hanju doesn't hide his sadness. He remembers that on the day his parents ran away and abandoned him. Some people wanted to go after them because they didn't want to see a boy without a family. Then Iron showed up and assigned Hanju to his parents' work. People said he was just a child and couldn't work, but the elder said the boy should do what he could. It was better than starving to death in the forest. Thinking about it now, Hanju concludes that sometimes Elder Iron was stingy. Still, he never hurt him, and even raised him as one of his own. In the past, the protagonist hated the old man, but if it weren't for him, he might not have survived, and his passing left a melancholy feeling. Hanju thinks that maybe this is the path of cultivation. Everything has a cause and effect, and time is both long and short. He tells Changyu to work hard in her cultivation, because if she were to pass away too, he'd feel lost. Changyu likes hearing that, since she thought Hanju didn't care about her. Then she says the spiritual grass has been planted, and now she wants to return to her cultivation and work hard to keep up with Hanju. As soon as she leaves, the protagonist becomes thoughtful, but he decides to do something about it. So he carves Iron's name into his cave, because he hopes Iron will be born into a good family in his next life. Another decade passes, and even without the help of pills, all of Hanju's spiritual roots except for earth and wood reach the final level of the Golden Core realm. His 100th birthday arrives, and so his system unlocks a new simulated challenge feature, which he really likes. Hanju says he never knew how strong he truly was, but now he can finally find out, so he confirms it with his system, and right after he's teleported to another dimension. The system welcomes him, as he's now in the simulated challenge field. Hanju thinks this feels like a dream within his consciousness. He sees that he can choose the simulation of anyone he knows to train against, something Hanju finds strange, but even so he picks the strongest one. With that, a simulation of Lee Kingzi, at the 8th level of the Nascent Soul Realm, is created. As soon as the Sect Master's avatar appears, he quickly attacks the protagonist, surprising him with his speed. Hanju says this simulated challenge has no martial respect. His opponent gave no warning and started attacking with full force, so he thinks he should do the same. The opponent vanishes into a cloud of smoke, and the protagonist realizes his attack didn't hurt him, because the opponent is all muscle and his entire body is golden, reflecting his level of the celestial constellation. Soon, the protagonist prepares to strike again, and launches his 9-dragon demonic expulsion seal at the enemy. But even though the avatar is hit, it remains unfazed, and charges into close combat. After that, waves of energy attacks spread across the battlefield. Hanju realizes that the seal is indeed powerful and forced the opponent into this state, but it can only repel the enemy, not defeat him, and he thinks it's still very difficult to handle an 8th level Nascent Soul Cultivator. Because of this, his system offers the option to reduce the opponent's strength, and Hanju thinks this makes the challenge more interesting. In the main peak hall of the Pure Jade sect, some leaders gather as there are matters to be discussed. Lai Kingzi says that Duan Tongshan transcended his tribulation a month ago and is now consolidating his cultivation, having already reached the soul formation realm. Jingshu asks if the sect master shouldn't be reaching the same level. Kingzi says no, because the soul essence is merely a mystical power and very difficult to attain. The Taoist master suggests asking for help from other sects, but Lei Kingzi says he's already done that, but they received no response. Then the Taoist master says that if the great ancestor were here, his strength would match that of the enemy, but he left 10 years ago and hasn't returned, making it impossible to find him now. So he says that together with Li Kingzi, they will face the enemy leader when the time comes. Lai Kingzi agrees, saying they have no other choice, because with everyone's current strength, it would be useless no matter who faces him. He also says that no one can break the golden body of the celestial constellation, because even with the strongest technique of the Pure Jade sect, it wouldn't be enough to stop him in his golden state. So he believes there may be a chance against the enemy. But little does he know what the protagonist has been doing recently. Hanju is slowly becoming capable of defeating Li Kingzi's avatar at its strongest level. A powerful storm rages outside the protagonist's cave. Lightning strikes endlessly around the region, and even takes on strange shapes. But amidst all this, Hanju meditates and initiates the nascent soul heavenly tribulation. He is the one causing all of this, not nature. An old saying Hanju knows says that a channel is formed where water flows, and over the last 10 years, all 6 of his spiritual foundations reached the 9th level of the Golden Core realm. But while he is in this process, Changyu searches for him and wonders why Hanju is ascending just as the enemies are about to invade. She realizes that Hanju is about to reach the nascent soul level and thinks this might be an advantage for their sect, and she also knows she can't interrupt him because doing so would severely harm him, and as his sect sister, she must protect him at all costs. However, her current strength is not enough for that. Therefore, she decides to wait for Hanju to finish and then take him to the inner sect. Until then, Changyu can only wait and defend him in case an enemy approaches. 10 days later, the demonic cult invasion begins, and all members of the enemy sect are present. Changyu senses their demonic aura and realizes it's coming from the main peak, which is a relief to her since it's somewhat far from Hanju's cave. But now she can't take him to the inner sect because that could put both of them in danger, so it's better that he stays in his cave since it will be safer. Then Changyu decides to go to her master, since she also swore to protect her. Meanwhile, Hanju has ascended to the nascent soul realm, and even his 6 paths of reincarnation have evolved. At this realm, a cultivator's power can interact with the heavens, the earth, and the 5 elements to gain supreme power. He can also merge all 6 spiritual foundations into one, creating a new and powerful spiritual foundation. From now on, Hanju will be able to directly absorb the spiritual key of heaven and earth, and his cultivation will become much more efficient. After that, his system issues an alert, saying that by advancing to the nascent soul realm, he will receive a mystical power as a reward. But he is also warned that his sect is under attack, which catches him off guard, as Hanju thought he would finish his training before that. His system issues a new alert, saying that a new individual stronger than the Jade Pure sect has been detected, and asks if he wants to start a simulated challenge. Hanju sees that this individual is also at the soul formation realm, and that no one in the sect can handle him. But since he defeated a weaker avatar, he thinks he can win this one too and accepts the challenge. While he stays inside the simulated training system, his sect is attacked by the enemies. Jean Kunmo attacks and calls out the name of Kao Kao, asking why he isn't there. He then concludes that everyone in the Jade Pure sect is trash. He also sees that his master must be finishing things up on the other side, so he orders all his disciples to burn everything after looting and to kill everyone. Since he can't find Teo Kao, John Kummo says he will offer the other members of the Jade Pure sect as a sacrifice for his dead disciples' honor. Back to the protagonist, he finishes the challenge in 1 minute and sees that the individual detected by his system was actually Duan Tongshan. Speaking of Duan Tongshan, he is wreaking havoc in the rival sect. The masters of the Jade Pure sect feel the enemy's terrifying aura, so Duan Tongshan tells them to surrender, and if they kneel and beg, their suffering might be less painful. Like Kingsley says that the members of the Jade Pure sect would rather die than surrender to the demonic cult. He then tries to attack, but his speed is not enough. The Taoist master says the enemy's bones are innate black magnets. Spiritual energy dissolves immediately after being absorbed by them. They don't know how to react. Even the fairy, who is also fighting, doesn't know how to counterattack. Despite being injured, she thinks of her disciples. Harixwan knows that Hanju is in seclusion and hopes the enemies don't find his cave. As for Changyu and the others, she feels sorrow, because as a master, she believes she has failed to protect her disciples and thinks all that's left is to die before them. Duan Tongshan says that the grudges that have lasted for centuries finally end today. He stares at the fairy and is about to finish her off, but laments it, saying she's far too beautiful to die. Not far from there, Mo Zhu is running from some enemies. She has already exhausted her spiritual energy trying to escape and can't even fly on a sword. Thinking she'll die anyway, she jumps off a cliff, as she'd rather die like that than fall into the enemy's hands. Mo Zhu thinks that if she had cultivated like Han Ju, this would never have happened, and she hopes to meet him in her next life. But to her surprise, the protagonist appears and stops her from falling. When she opens her eyes and sees him, Mo Zhu concludes that she died and that both of them are in paradise. With that, the protagonist's system alerts that Mo Zhu's favorability toward him has increased to 5.5 stars. Sometime later, he goes to Mo Fuchu and entrusts him with his sister, saying that he's heading to the main peak. Upon seeing the protagonist so strong, Mo Fuchou wonders how much he must have cultivated, because before Hanju arrived, Mo Fuchou was surrounded by 3 Golden Core level enemies. Even so, all of them were instantly killed by Hanju. Back to the protagonist, he sees that the situation looks terrible, There's the soul of a soul formation cultivator on the main peak, and he can only blame himself for being late, until suddenly he looks to the side and sees several sect brothers surrounded by enemies. Chang Yu is among them and tries to withstand the attacks. Li Sangson is also there and tries to stay behind so the others can escape, but they all end up agreeing to stay and fight to the death if needed. However, in the middle of it, Chang Yu sees a flash approaching. Some spiritual swords appear out of nowhere, and in the blink of an eye, all the enemies are defeated. Everyone in the group is left speechless witnessing this. In the sky, Chang Yu sees only a beam of light moving and deduces it must be Hanju. Nearby, an enemy surrounds someone. He says that if this woman agrees to return with him to the demonic cult and become his wife, he'll spare her life. However, Xing Hongxuan says that Duan Tongshan killed her parents, and she'd rather die than go back there. Since she refused, the enemy draws a poisoned sword, but Xing Hongxuan ends up seeing something and becomes overjoyed. The enemy thinks she changed her mind and agreed to go with him, and he doesn't see that his end is near. After Xing Hongxuan is saved from danger, he realizes that this guy is the second-ranked core disciple of the demonic cult, but Hanju took him down in a matter of seconds. The protagonist tells her to find a safe place to hide because it's no longer safe there. Xing Hongxuan agrees and tells him to be careful as well. With that, her affection level toward the protagonist rises to 6 stars, but he doesn't have time to worry about that now. At the main peak, Duan Tongshan asks if that's all they have to offer, because previously all their cult did was use corpses to raise venomous insects. However, they were targeted by other sects for centuries because of that, and now that he's a soul formation cultivator, nothing can stop him. The fairy sees that her sect companions are in ruins, and she's next. Duan Tongshan says that if he uses all the bodies there for cultivation, it will increase his cult's power, and they'll become #1 in the Great Yan Dynasty. And the foundation of the Pure Jade sect, which has endured for centuries, will come to a final end today. He says the fairy refuses to give up, and asks why she doesn't try guessing how many people from the Pure Jade sect are still alive. Furious at the provocation, X1 tells the enemy to go to hell. Immediately, Duan Tongshan calls her a filthy-mouthed whore, and tells her to curse all she wants on her way to the afterlife. Seeing his beloved is about to perish, Li Qingzi screams in desperation, and right after, a massive explosion occurs at the scene. However, the master is saved by her disciple at the last second. Hanju asks if she's alright, and Xwan is surprised to see him appear so suddenly. Seeing this, Li Qingzi admits he made a misjudgment, saying that Xwan truly chose a good disciple. But the fairy tells the protagonist to get out of there immediately. In a desperate act, she even says that if he doesn't, he'll no longer be a member of the Pure Jade sect. She also tells him to run, and she'll follow soon after. Meanwhile, the enemy sees that the fairy was saved by a brat, but says that if he kneels now, he'll spare his life and let him join the demonic cult. The protagonist's system issues a mission alert, and he says this is all thanks to the simulated challenge, otherwise he would have chosen to run. But now that he wants to kill the enemy, there's no need for any other option. Duan Tongshan calls him an arrogant little brat, and the protagonist realizes that even the most casual cultivator is full of emotions. In the middle of all this, Zhang Kunmo appears, seeking revenge against Sto Kao. The protagonist's allies fear for him, and the cult leader says he won't even need to deal with this brat himself, since their strongest elder can kill him alone. So he'll just stand back and enjoy watching his despair in the face of death. However, what happens next shocks everyone, because in a matter of seconds, the protagonist takes down a nascent soul elder, something that's unbelievable to both allies and enemies. Even his master is stunned by his power. The protagonist then faces the enemy leader and says he's next. Hanju declares that it's time to take out the trash. Duan Tongshan asks if he thinks he's strong just because he landed a hit on one of his allies. Zhang Kunmo, even after being struck, manages to stand up again. He still longs for his revenge and tries to use his anomalous demonic lantern against the protagonist. The Taoist master warns Hanju of the danger and tells him to flee. Zhang Kunmo says that Kao Tao's soul will be offered to his dead disciple, thus fulfilling his revenge. However, the protagonist simply prepares to attack, and with a single strike, obliterates Zhang Kunmo instantly. His sect brothers are amazed when they witness this incredible power. Even the enemy leader is impressed. Duan Tongshan says that for someone to be able to eliminate an elder of his cult at such a young age, Hanju is definitely qualified to join the demonic cult, and once again offers him the opportunity, promising many rewards, but the protagonist responds by attacking the enemy. Duan Tongshan manages to defend himself with a magic shield. Then Hanju thinks that in order to block his triple shadow sword, the enemy must be using something very powerful. Duan Tongshan says he possesses the Inao Black Magnet, a treasure that absorbs energy and is also immune to most attacks. He also says the protagonist will never be able to touch him, and since he rejected the offer, he won't spare him, even if he is talented. The enemy says that there are few prodigies in this world because they have to survive using their own abilities, and most of them die halfway through their journey, just like Hanju will die today. Elsewhere in the Pure Jade sect, battles are taking place between sect members and the demonic cult, and even from afar, they hear a loud explosion coming from the main peak. Those present witness the power of someone in the soul formation stage. Duan Tongshin says he will let Hanju taste a bit of suffering and declares he will kill everyone from his sect right in front of him, letting him witness the defeat and be the last one to die. In turn, the protagonist takes the Kailan sword from his inventory and says the enemy is talking a lot of nonsense, claiming he should think more carefully about his last words. Duan Tongshin is shocked when he senses something strange. He feels as if he's trapped by something and his body won't move, so he asks what kind of technique this is. The protagonist attacks with the heavenly punishment of the ghost deity sword and hits the enemy directly, reducing him to nothing but dust. His master wonders how this is even possible. Everyone else is in shock because they just saw a nascent soul cultivator kill someone at the soul formation stage. An elder witnesses the full power of the protagonist in action and thinks that the Pure Jade sect must never lose someone with such talent. Meanwhile, Hanju thinks that only the enemy's body was destroyed, since his Six Paths technique can sense a soul essence trying to escape, which means Duan Tongshin still has a chance to restore his body, so he goes after the enemy's soul and searches through the entire destroyed battlefield. Now only in soul form, Duan Tongshin is still desperate, but believes he hasn't been noticed and could use the distraction to escape. He refuses to accept that Hanju is just a nascent soul cultivator and wonders where all that power comes from, until the protagonist finds Duan Tongshin's soul and introduces himself as Hanju. He says he will now put an end to the centuries-old grudge between the sect and the demonic cult. Desperate, Duan Tongshin says he will never let them live in peace, and even if he becomes a ghost forever, his cult will still survive. However, those were his final words as the protagonist finished him off for good. After that, the protagonist's system congratulates him for completing the mission, but warns that Xiao has developed a 5-star hatred toward him, though Hanju has never heard that name before. Above the nascent soul realm, there are only a few other realms, listed from lowest to highest: soul formation, void amalgamation, fusion, transcendence tribulation, and finally, Mahayana. The protagonist's system warns that Xiao was using Duan Tongshin as a puppet, and now that he's dead, the spirit is seeking revenge. Hanju sees that Xiao is at the second level of the amalgamation realm, and there's no way he can face him, not even if he advances to the soul formation realm. Jinxu draws the other's attention and says there's something wrong with the innate black magnet. From a terrifying skull, a being emerges. He says Duan Tongshin was so useless he couldn't even stall for more time. He also says the protagonist has decent mystical power, considering he killed someone in the soul formation realm while still a nascent soul, but says that will be useless against him since he's an amalgamation cultivator and nothing below that level can hurt him. He introduces himself as Xiao, an elder of the demon-taming sect from the northern nation, and claims he's been planning this for years but never expected things to go wrong. Hanju asks what the enemy means by that. Xiao says his puppet was just stalling and waiting for his arrival. He just didn't expect someone in the Pure Jade sect would be a match for him. The protagonist says Xiao's soul essence feels abnormal and suspects his real body is either injured or destroyed. However, Xiao says Hanju has no right to know such details, as he despises tormenting a beginner. Still, Xiao isn't there to fight and says he's already late to return, but now he's going back to his sect and promises to return to finish his revenge. After that, Li Qingzi says it's no surprise that the lower viridescent cult was ambushing the 10,000 Demons Kingdom, and now it's clear that the cultists were working together. He also says the priority now is to eliminate the demonic cultivators that are still present and asks if Hanju can do that. In turn, Hanju blames himself for his master being hurt and says he'll heal her right away, but the fairy says she's not that badly injured. He says that taking care of his master is the most important thing right now, because he thinks he can't go fight the enemies alone, as that would only increase his fame, and he wants to remain as discreet as possible, and only did what he did because it was necessary. The other masters see this and feel envious of the fairy, as they too would like to have a disciple like that. The Taoist master asks what Hanju's true identity is, saying that with his level of cultivation, there's no way he could be a disciple that the Pure Jade sect is able to support. Hanju says that fate united him with the sect, but affirms that all the others need to know is that he is a loyal disciple of the sect and would never harm it. While they talk, some enemies approach, but they notice that their leader is no longer there and also see some corpses along the way, including Kunmo's. Upon seeing them, Li Qingzi tells the protagonist to attack them and says that if he does, he'll become the next sect master. Jinxu tells him not to move, as she just healed his arm, so he shouldn't exert himself. Then Light Kingsley simply says that the demon leader is dead and orders all pure Jade sect disciples to defeat the remaining enemies. Soon, the enemies start running since their master has fallen and they will be next. But behind them, the Jade disciples run too, obeying their leader. Since Light Kingsley ordered that no enemy be spared, Jinxu says it's good that they ran away because this will prevent further casualties on their side and they won't be attacking again anytime soon. After that, Lee Kingsley says that all the elders present witnessed Hanju's power and declares that from now on he will be the vice sect master of the pure Jade sect because he himself is no longer capable of evolving and it's up to the sect's youth to carry it forward. However, the protagonist refuses the offer. He says that all he wants is to cultivate in peace, so if he accepts that position, he won't have time for cultivation. Then another master suggests that Hanju just receive the title of elder and be allowed to enjoy all the sect's benefits. With that, the protagonist is willing to agree, but he's still worried about that enemy from before, since he is an amalgamation realm cultivator. But the great sage tells him not to worry about that, as it's likely the enemy will try to restore his body first before attempting anything. The reason he lasted so long was probably to use a certain secret technique and absorb the spiritual key and vitality of the pure Jade sect. Besides, the northern country is far away on the other side of the world. Even if he rushed, the Orthodox sect wouldn't let him cause trouble. Even with all that, Hanju can't feel at ease and concludes that he will have to cultivate even more to reach the enemy's level. After the battle, the Jade sect began to recover and plan its reconstruction. At the same time, a rumor about a powerful figure began to spread among them. The fairy says the sect succeeded in escaping the crisis this time, all thanks to the sect's demon-slaying elder, who killed the enemy with a single swing of his sword and turned the situation in their favor. However, she doesn't mention that this so-called elder is the protagonist, since she knows his description. After giving her speech, she dismisses all the other disciples and asks only Hanju to remain. Then the fairy asks if he has anything to say. Hanju doesn't really know what she's talking about, so she asks the same question as before and questions him about his true identity and his goals within the sect. Saik-Swan says that unlike the others, she is his master and must know everything about him, and she's not surprised he never needed her guidance. Then she asks if she should refer to him as Daoi's companion Han in the future, but he says he hides nothing and believes that Iron must have already told her everything about his past. The fairy says that even assuming he has unparalleled talent, his skills and techniques must have some origin and asks where they come from. Hanju isn't surprised that his master doubts him. That's exactly why he stays discreet most of the time. But now he's cornered, so he agrees to tell her everything, but makes Saik-Swan promise to keep it all a secret. However, instead of telling the truth, Hanju makes up a fantastical story, hoping that it will convince her. He says that when he was a child, he found a ring under a burnt tree that had been struck by lightning. At the time, he decided to return it to its owner, but he never found them. However, what he didn't expect was that an immortal lived inside the ring, and because of his act of kindness, the immortal gave the child an opportunity. His body was pure and full of potential, so the immortal saw talent in the child and offered to grant him his techniques, believing destiny had brought them together. After that, the immortal transmitted his dharma and even promised that Hanju would become an immortal as well, though his path would be different, so he cultivates in seclusion. After hearing this far-fetched story, Saik-Swan says that something like that has happened before, so she believes it, but asks why Hanju risked his life for the sect. She claims the sect never treated him well before and believes he doesn't see the sect as his true home. Hanju says that's true, but he has lived for 100 years, and there aren't many people he truly cares about, but everyone he does care about is in the sect, including his master. Saik-Swan's acceptance of him grows, and she asks what Hanju plans to do from now on. Hanju says he intends to cultivate in seclusion as always, because he wants to be ready in case they're attacked by that monster again, and he needs to become stronger as soon as possible. With his master's permission, he returns to the cave. He thinks that before, everyone saw him as a coward who lived in seclusion, but now those same people see him as the sect's hero, and he concludes that, as expected, the strong rule over everything, and that will never change. So the best thing to do is to cultivate in seclusion, since if he had cultivated 100 years less, it would have been hard to stay alive. Hanju believes opportunities only arise for those who are prepared, so he must keep doing his best to cultivate in the future. Soon after, he receives a visit from Chong-Yu. She says the sect gathered some natural treasures that can help increase the spiritual Kai in his cave, and she's there to help plant them. The protagonist thanks his senior stepsister for the help. However, Chang-yu says that since he's now an elder, he can't keep calling her his senior sister. The protagonist's system alerts him that Chang-yu's admiration for him has increased. He then approaches and says that if Chang-yu keeps working hard in cultivation and doesn't slack off, she will always be his senior sister. Extremely smitten, Chang-yu says she does her best in cultivation, but she can't compare to him. Han-ju tells her not to worry, and that he has a request. Chang-yu said she'll help with whatever he needs. But contrary to her expectations, the protagonist only asks for help in reinforcing the cave's defenses because he doesn't want any surprises in the future. 3 years later, once the Pure Jade sect finished its preparations, the master led several peaks to attack the enemies, while leaving others to guard the sect. The demonic cult lost power after the death of its leader, so it was quickly subdued by the Pure Jade sect's assault. After the evil cult was defeated, the news spread throughout the realm and the sect's prestige increased, along with the fame of the demon-slaying elder reaching beyond the sect. However, his name and identity were not revealed, and because of that, the system rewarded the protagonist with some victory bonuses. A few days later, heavy thunder falls from the sky, and some people believe it's a sign of a new attack, but they hesitate since the demonic cult had already been defeated, until the sect master reassures everyone. He says that this surge of energy is coming from Han-ju, not from the enemies, so there's nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, the protagonist is creating a greater Chiliocosm thunderstorm, a lightning spell he's been practicing. By mastering such a powerful technique, Han-ju is delighted because this is exactly the kind of ability he likes. Until someone suddenly calls for him, the protagonist sees that it's Lee Kingzi and asks what he wants. Lee Kingzi says he has something he'd like to discuss with him. Then Lee Kingzi says that Han-ju is an essential member of the sect and he's willing to give him whatever he needs. Han-ju says he doesn't have any specific requests, so Lee Kingzi asks if the cave isn't too cramped. Han-ju says no, he's already used to it. Lee Kingzi says that if he wants, he can move to the main peak since it has more comfortable places for cultivation, but Han-ju refuses. Then Lee Kingzi says that at the very least he wants to help renovate this cave using the sect's best resources. He says he has another matter and asks if Han-ju would be willing to accept a disciple. Lee Kingzi says there's a young man with enormous potential, and all Han-ju needs to do is offer him a bit of guidance. He also says that once the boy grows, he could be a great help to Han-ju. Quickly, the protagonist detects through his system a bearer of innate providence, and sees that the boy's name is Yang Tiandong. He is half human, half demon, and was recently adopted by the Pure Jade sect. Yang Tiandong greets the demon-slaying elder. Han-ju says he'll accept him as a disciple, but will only be responsible for teaching him spells and mystical powers. The sect will handle his cultivation. Lee Kingzi agrees and says that Yang will need to contribute to the sect in order to learn from them. He also gives a box of registration slips to the protagonist, saying they could be for his future disciples. After that, he leaves and tells the two to get to know each other better. As soon as the protagonist is alone with Yang Tiandong, he says he has already deduced his past and knows everything about him, including his half-demon origin since he was imprisoned by the cultists in the past. Lee Kingzi had warned him to keep his past a secret, but that was no use since the protagonist found out even without Yang Tiandong telling him. Either way, Han-ju accepted him as a disciple, making Yang Tiandong admire him even more, as his new master's deduction skills left him deeply impressed. Han-ju, in turn, thanks his system, because without it he wouldn't have had that information. Then he gives the disciple slip to the boy and tells him to find a place to cultivate. Before that, Yang Tiandong says he has a request. The protagonist asks what it is. Yang Tiandong says his father personally left him a supreme technique, but he can only learn it once he reaches the soul formation realm, so he asks his master to guide him there. But when he sees the item Yang Tiandong has, the protagonist is stunned. Han-ju sees that this feather is blocking his divine sense and realizes that it requires the divine sense of a soul formation cultivator to unlock the secret technique hidden within the feather, something he's eager to uncover. Han-ju accepts the feather and says he will study it. He also says that for beginner cultivators, it's necessary to cultivate their spiritual energy for 10 years before learning spells. Yang Tiandong is surprised by the amount of time, but agrees to begin cultivation right away. 10 years of cultivation pass, and Han-ju also cultivated during that period. He thinks it won't be long before he reaches the soul formation realm and can't wait to start preparing for it. But now he wants to see how his disciple is doing. Yang Tiandong, for his part, sat in the same spot for 10 years without moving and remains motionless, since he has no experience with cultivation. Even so, Han-ju sees that the boy went from the 1st to the 7th level of the Foundation realm, and praises his cultivation speed. Then he asks how Yang Tandong felt during those 10 years. Yang Tandong says he benefited greatly from cultivating for 10 years and even came to understand some principles. But Hanju thinks that's nonsense, since he himself has cultivated for hundreds of years and never understood anything. In any case, he tells Yang Tandong that he can go out and complete some missions. He also says that the sect's mission building has a list of monthly contributions and tells his disciple to return when he's at the top of the list. Yang Tandong wonders how long it'll take to complete that, but even so, he has to obey his master. Now that he's rid of the boy, Hanju is alone with the feather and thinks he can finally uncover its secret. He prepared well over the past 10 years and strengthened his cultivation foundation to improve his divine sense, but he still lacks the main ingredient, the divine perception pill, a pill that enhances divine sense. There are 9 in total, and the more consumed, the stronger the effect becomes. With it, a nascent soul realm cultivator can have the divine sense of a soul formation realm cultivator. After using them, Hanju thinks the pills truly lived up to their promise, and now he wants to take a look at the feather. But as he does, a beam of light fills the room, and a great deal of information is transmitted from the magical feather. Outside, a few young people walk toward the sect, hoping to be accepted. Seeing so much excitement from the youths, Mo Fuxiao remembers when he was young. It was the same back then when he joined the sect, and now, as time flies, he is responsible for recruiting new disciples. He also thinks that this job is actually easy, since he's dealing with talented and well-mannered children. However, someone from afar shoots a dart in his direction. Mo Fuxiao senses the danger, and manages to dodge the projectile, but the dart explodes, and spreads a poisonous smoke around the area. Immediately, Mo Fuxiao tries to protect the children from the attack, but before he can run, the enemy jumps out from a bush and attacks him. Mo Fuxiao prepares for combat, and fights the enemy using his magic. While the enemy attacks with blades, he uses magical spells, doing everything he can to push the enemy away and protect the children. But just when he thinks he's pushed the enemy back, Mo Fuxiao gets an unpleasant surprise. He is struck from behind, discovering that the enemy wasn't alone. The children are extremely frightened. However, the enemy says no one should move, because they only want Mo Fuxiao, but if anyone interferes, they will not be spared. Mo Fuxiao can't move and asks who they are. They say they are the ghosts in raincoats and declare that a great calamity is about to fall upon the Pure Jade sect. However, something approaches and scares them. The new disciples notice the disturbance. It's a mystical power being used to create a second body, mimicking the original person, and that person asks who dares to capture disciples right in front of his sect. The body created isn't normal size, but rather colossal. Hanju is behind this, and he's testing his new abilities. The only problem is that he can't act freely because of the children nearby, so he decides to use another strategy. The new disciples are scared and say they don't want to die. Not just them, but even the enemies fear for their lives and decide to retreat, taking some hostages with them. However, they see that this giant is from the Pure Jade sect and wonder how he can attack with so many comrades around. Even Mo Fuxiao begs for the children not to be dragged into this, but he sees Hanju approaching and realizes it was all a bluff. Mo Fuxiao can only hear the action happening behind him, and with great effort he tries to look back. But when he manages to, he sees no enemies around. Even the new disciples are surprised, because they didn't really see what happened. With that, Mo Fuxiao concludes that he knows only one person capable of doing all that, so he feels more at ease. Then he tells one of his allies to stop standing still and come help and heal. Meanwhile, at the main peak, the sect master is enjoying his favorite manhwa, until Hanju bursts in, almost scaring him to death. The protagonist throws the enemies on the floor and says they were trying to kidnap Mo Fuxiao, but now he's leaving them in the master's care. Upon seeing the enemy's clothes and weapons, Lai Qingzi recognizes them as the ghosts in raincoats and says they have assassinated many righteous cultivators. The old elder says that 1,000 years ago, these individuals tried to conquer the entire cultivation world of Great Yan, but they were crushed by the orthodox sects. They murdered talented disciples from various sects, and now they're capturing gifted disciples from orthodox sects. Lai Qingzi says the enemies must have gathered information about them, since they tried to capture talented disciples, and maybe even have spies infiltrated in the sect. The old man says they can't jump to conclusions, since the demonic cult was hidden for 1,000 years and suddenly returned. So these enemies must be planning something too. He also says they certainly have soul realm cultivators, but he doesn't know how strong they are. Hanju just thinks about running away, but the old man says that he and Lai Qingzi will personally visit several sects to unite them all. Therefore, he says that in his absence, he'll leave the sect's security in Hanju's hands. The protagonist sees that this gives him a new mission notification from his system, and the rewards are actually good, so he accepts it. Lai Qingzi says that's great, because now he can rest easy knowing that Elder Han is protecting the sect. Both their acceptance of the protagonist increases by 4 stars, and Hanju, in turn, thinks that as long as he doesn't have to go outside, everything is fine. 6 years have passed, and he has advanced to the 5th level of the nascent soul realm, and his life expectancy has increased to 1,080 years. Thinking it over, he realizes that his disciple hasn't returned yet, and concludes that maybe he assigned the boy a task that was too difficult. But he decides to check his system to see if his disciple is alright or not. To his surprise, he sees that not only his disciple, but also Li Qingzi, the Great Elder, and Zhou Fan were attacked and captured by the enemies. With that, Hanju thinks that normally when a disciple is in trouble, it's natural for the master to go save them, but he says the abyss is a trap, and he feels that a mysterious power is manipulating him and believes that this goes against his destiny, so he needs to walk a path opposite to danger. So Hanju says he feels sorry for his disciple, but all he can do now is wish him good luck. The protagonist doesn't mind leaving, but as an elder, he must do something for the sect and needs to repay the favor that was done for him. Along with that, he remembers that Lei Qingzi suspected there was a spy among them, so Hanju decides to check his system for more information. However, he is shocked by what he finds, as the spy turns out to be the former immortal Taoist of Thunder. The protagonist thinks that the Thunder Immortal hid himself very well, and now he realizes that when he saved the sect, the Taoist master was the only one who didn't develop any affection for him. Hanju used to think the Thunder Immortal was just reserved, but now he wonders what he should do about this, since both sect masters are absent. The only person he trusts now is his master, so he goes to her and reveals what he discovered and asks for help to deal with the situation. Taixuan asks who the spy is. Even without having any proof, Hanju says it's the Thunder Immortal, and he doesn't know if his master will believe him. But as soon as Taixuan hears the name, she orders the protagonist to kill the spy. She didn't even hesitate, which makes Hanju think she might have some grudge against the Taoist master. But Taixuan says she had already suspected him for some time, and now that Hanju suspects him too, she believes it must be true. She also says they can't trust this matter to the other elders, and now they need to head straight to Thunder Peak. After that, the two go together to the Taoist master's dwelling. Upon arriving, he is surprised to be visited by 2 elders at once. However, the protagonist says he is there to say goodbye, and without further delay, he attacks with his triple shadow sword. The Taoist master is struck by surprise and asks what's going on. Hanju says he obtained information that he is a spy from the Raincloak sect and the recent disappearances are connected to him. He also says that today, evil will be eradicated and the missing will have their vengeance. But to the protagonist's surprise, the Taoist master assumes a thunder form and quickly escapes. Now that he's been discovered, he intends to fight. However, the protagonist is also a master of lightning and uses his thunderstorm to attack him. Taixuan says she barely saw Hanju move when he struck, and whoever faces him has no chance of escape. The Taoist master took on his spiritual form. Since his body was destroyed, he is terrified and even begs for mercy. Hanju says he will show mercy. He uses the 9-dragon Taoist expulsion seal and says he'll leave the rest to his master. After that, the Taoist master's disciples appear, and upon seeing the fairy, they ask what happened. Taixuan says that according to the demon-slaying elder, the Taoist master was an enemy spy, and that's why he was executed. She also says they can continue cultivating, and a new elder will be assigned soon. To avoid being captured, she tells them to refrain from leaving the sect, but the news is not well received by everyone. One of them says their master had worked hard for many years and doesn't believe he was a spy, even going so far as to demand evidence. Taixuan shows them the ring of their former master and says it contains an item from the Raincloak sect used to send letters and exchange information. With that, they believe it and become fearful of the demon-slaying elder, as they now believe no one escapes his judgment. Meanwhile, Hanju sees that the other elders are innocent, but discovers that there are still 4 more spies, and there are spies from both the Orthodox and demonic sects. With that, he believes it'll be a problem if he tries to deal with all the spies at once, so he decides to memorize a few names and deal with them later. Right after, his system alerts that a bearer of innate providence has been detected and asks if the protagonist wishes to check the origin. Hanju wonders how this is possible, because when he compares his disciple's bloodline, it seems like garbage. He doubts what he saw, but soon after, he walks up to an old man who was passing by and asks if he can have one of the chicks he's carrying. The old man says they're all for the inner sect. So Hanju introduces himself as an elder and says that if anyone asks, the old man can say he was the one who took one of the animals. That way, the old man agrees to let the protagonist take as many as he wants. Hanju says he only needs one because he sees that it's actually an infernal black chicken, which is a reincarnation of a demon from the upper world. Sometime later, Saixuan greets the two returning masters and asks how the trip went. Both the master and Lei Qingzi are happy that the fairy was worried about them, but the fairy kills their joy and reveals the truth about the old immortal Thunder Taoist. They're shocked by the information, and even get angry, to the point of asking where the body was buried, because their anger makes them consider desecrating the corpse. The protagonist's system notifies him of the master's return and also congratulates him on his recent achievements, but Hanju only cares about the little chick he just got. While Hanju is trying to train the chick, Sing Hongxuan shows up and tells him not to worry, because she found several treasures while out adventuring, and she already finished planting all of them. Not only that, she says she also has another gift for him. Hanju asks if it's a storage ring. Sing Hongxuan says yes. She got the item during one of her adventures, since there were many treasures involved. That's why she says it's good to go on adventures and not just stay in seclusion. But Hanju says all he wants is a peaceful life. She says Hanju needs to face reality because his sect won't cover for him forever, and there are many sects stronger than this one. The cultivation world of Great Yan has more than 20 sects. Among them, 12 are orthodox sects, and the Pure Jade sect should be in the top 5. Hanju knows his sect is among the top 5, which is why they have so many enemies. Sing Hongxuan says that most sects don't differ much in strength, and it may be difficult for Hanju to live peacefully, because recently a powerful figure has emerged in the Crimson Bird Sword sect. His name is Huang Jihao. There are rumors that he wants to challenge every sect in the world, and she asks what Hanju would do if he came to the Pure Jade sect. Hanju asks why there are so many battle-crazed lunatics everywhere, and wonders if this Huang Jihao has ever killed anyone during his sect challenges. Sing Hongxuan thinks not, since the Crimson Bird Sword sect is an orthodox sect, so the protagonist feels more at ease and says if Huang Jihao comes to the sect, he'll gladly welcome him at any time, and also considers training his chick in the meantime. A year later, the Pure Jade sect is still being targeted by enemies. Yi Sanlang, a member of the Raincoat sect, waited for a month, but the Thunder Master never showed up to report any information, and he wonders what happened to him. He thinks he would have infiltrated the rival sect long ago if it weren't for the presence of the demon-slaying elder, because the rumors about him are pretty scary. Until suddenly, someone appears and asks if Yi Sanlang is a member of the Raincoat sect. Hanju introduces himself as a personal disciple of the old Thunder Taoist, but thinks his system is amazing since he can get close to the enemy without exposing himself to danger. He also says that not long ago, the Taoist became a target of the sect leader, so he can't lead the sect, and asked his disciple to come in his place. But Yi Sanlang says that isn't the secret code between them and attacks, only he didn't expect that this individual was so strong. Yi Sanlang wonders why he couldn't break through the opponent's defense, and also says that only the sect leader had this much power, so why does some random guy have it too? But then Yi Sanlang starts to come to terms with it, and imagines that the person in front of him might actually be the demon-slaying elder. So he says they'll need half of their high-ranking reinforcements if they want to deal with the demon-slaying elder, and he's determined to deliver that information no matter what. But he is caught by surprise. Yi Sanlang was struck by the heavenly punishment of the ghost sword deity. He became a spiritual essence before even realizing it, and now he understands why the sect leader always said everything was his fault. The protagonist is about to strike him with the greater Chiliocosm storm, but Yi Sanlang begs not to be hit and says he will surrender. So Hanju gives him a chance to speak and asks what the intention of the Raincloak sect is. Yi Sanlang says that before assimilating a sect, they capture the talents. After their sect is destroyed, the only option for the prisoners is to join them. The enemy asks if their sect has a cultivator at the Soul Formation realm or higher. Hanju says the Pure Jade sect does have cultivators in the Soul Formation realm. As for the Void Amalgamation realm, he can't say for sure. He asks Yi Sanlang why their sect hides in the shadows if they're so strong, and where the prisoners are. Yi Sanlang says he doesn't know, claiming he's just an ordinary deacon. The protagonist doesn't really believe him, and soon he sees that Yi Sanlang's hatred for him has increased, so Hanju says that with that, he has given up on living. After that, Hanju says the enemy can go. Yi Sanlang even gets excited, but Hanju says he's not going home, he's going to hell, and that was the end of Yi Sanlang's career. Nearby, Sing Hongxuan says she found another ring and wants to give it to Hanju, but a disciple says that's not an ordinary ring, as it has a different aura. 2 years have passed, and the protagonist's chicken is now bigger. In his cave, Lei Qingzi tells him that he needs his help. He says he discovered where the Raincloak sect is holding the captured disciples, but the terrain is hard to attack. Still, he's counting on Hanju's help. The protagonist thinks this could be a distraction because the moment he leaves the sect, the enemies might take the chance to attack the Pure Jade sect. Moreover, an expert in the nascent soul realm might just be a deacon in the Raincloak sect, and it would be hard to deal with them. Lai Kingzi agrees and leaves the sect's defense to Hanju. The protagonist says that unless a void amalgamation shows up, no one will be able to defeat the sect, and to be sure, the protagonist thinks it's better to test his limits. In the simulated challenge training field, Hanju wants to train for now with an opponent of his level. He wants to test Duan Tongshin's avatar at full potential. The protagonist is at the 6th level of the nascent soul realm. He says that last time he didn't give his opponent a chance, but now he will let him attack with everything. And so the fight between them begins. Shortly after, the training ends. Hanju only managed a draw when he fought against the 9th level of the Soul Formation realm. He thinks this won't do, so he concludes that he needs to go into secluded cultivation immediately. But first, he wants to confirm the movements of the Raincloak sect. Meanwhile, he thinks his disciple should be able to endure a little longer, because he wants to feel confident enough before going to rescue him. Far away, in the Raincloak sect, some wonder why Yi Sanlang hasn't returned yet. They think it's impossible for him to have been captured, because aside from the demon-slaying elder, no one could defeat him. Yi Sanlang is the only one who knows who the spy is on the rival side. Except for the sect leader, each spy only has one person they report to. But the sect leader is very cautious, so they think it's better to just destroy the Pure Jade sect at once. And if the hostages refuse to cooperate, they'll no longer be useful. However, right afterward, someone kicks the door in. They ask who this individual is. The man asks if that's all they've got, and says it's not even worth drawing his sword against them. He introduces himself as Huang Jihao of the Crimson Bird Sword sect, and says he wants to challenge the Raincloak sect, so he wants to know where their headquarters is. The enemies don't like this insolence, and one of them suggests letting the leader handle this intruder. But another says the leader won't like it and will skin them alive just for disturbing him. Huang Jihao gets tired of talking and draws his sword, but one of them says their leader is in seclusion and won't be able to fight right now, so he suggests that Huang Jihao go to the Pure Jade sect and challenge them first. And he declares that if Huang Jihao is that person, they agreed to reveal everything he wants. Huang Jihao says that the Pure Jade sect offers no challenge worthy of him, but one of the men says the sect isn't what it used to be, because now they have a disciple known as the Demon-Slaying Elder, who earned that title after killing a cultist with a single blow. In response, Huang Jihao says he fought the sect master and the great elder of the Pure Jade sect, and their strength was mediocre. He's never even heard of this so-called dangerous elder, but the men from the Raincoat sect say they wouldn't dare lie, and even mention that the demonic cult fell because of that elder. Huang Jihao says that for now, he will challenge the Pure Jade sect, since in the end, they made that deal to stay alive. However, he says the Raincoat sect should tell him the location of their master, and that he'll return later to challenge him. Back in the protagonist's cave, Chang Yu shows up to visit him. She asks when Hanju adopted a pet, and says that this chicken is big and fluffy. But Hanju says it's his precious mount, and warns that Chang Yu couldn't possibly repay him if she damaged the animal. Chang Yu asks if Hanju isn't a bit too special to use a chicken as a mount, but admits his face looks even more handsome. Along with his behavior, Chang Yu feels satisfied just by looking at him. She also says she'd like to know how incredible Hanju's parents must have been, since she believes they were unmatched. The protagonist says his parents were ordinary people. Over a century has passed, and by now, they're probably dead. Hanju thinks that his blood ties ended when he was abandoned, and he doesn't even miss them. But changing the subject, he asks the reason for her visit. Chang Yu says that their master has a sect brother named Elder Guan, who was expelled from the Pure Jade sect long ago for offending someone. But he recently sent a letter promising to return and intends to compete for the position of sect master. Hanju doesn't care much about that. Chang Yu says there's a rumor that Elder Guan is in love with their master, and he might even become her Dao companion. Upon hearing this, the protagonist asks how strong this elder is. The girl says Guan is in the soul formation realm, and everyone except the current master is celebrating, thinking the sect might soon have a true expert as its leader. With that, Hanju asks her to deliver a message to the sect master, saying that he'll do his best to protect the current leader of the Pure Jade sect. Hanju thinks things are getting troublesome, and he won't be able to avoid a confrontation with Elder Guan. The problem is how to resolve this peacefully for the sake of his master, and there's an even bigger issue, specifically involving his system. The innate providence detector has been active for half a day, and Hanju wonders why this guy insists on challenging every sect out there. Seeing how this mission notification was triggered, Hanju suspects Huang Jihao is getting closer, so he thinks it's better to prevent than to fix, and decides to run a simulated challenge. But when he does that, he defeats the avatar of Huang Jihao in 2 minutes. Hanju doesn't care much. and even thinks Huan Jihao lasted longer than expected. Hanju considers that fight too long and wants to shorten the time so as not to attract too much attention. He wants to stop the enemy before he reaches the sect, otherwise it will be hard to handle the situation discreetly. That's the only way, but it also depends on Huan Jihao's personality. Speaking of him, Huan Jihao is approaching, but along the way, he realizes someone is waiting for him. Huan Jihao sees that this individual is at the 9th level of Foundation establishment and wonders how he hadn't noticed him before. He notes that this man is interesting and has a pleasant and slender appearance. Huan Jihao is also impressed by the person's beauty and compliments his youthful and elegant aesthetic. Instead of feeling threatened, Huan Jihao feels a favorable impression toward this man. Then the protagonist's system says that Huan Jihao has developed a 2-star favorability toward him. Hanju definitely didn't expect that. He wonders where that favorability came from, since he hasn't done anything yet. Huan Jihao says he feels a natural affinity with the protagonist and asks if he would accept him as his master, claiming he could help him become a vast spring in the future. But the protagonist says he's not that kind of person and starts thinking something might be wrong with his charm stat. Then Huan Jihao introduces himself and says he's from the Crimson Bird Sword sect and asks if the protagonist has never heard of him. He also says he's there to challenge the demon-slaying elder, but Hanju asks why he wants to specifically face the elder. Huan Jihao says he already defeated the sect master and the great elder of the Pure Jade sect, but now he wants to challenge the strongest disciple of the sect. He wanted to challenge the Raincloak sect, but they told him they would only accept the challenge if Huan Jihao defeats the demon-slaying elder first. The protagonist asks how strong the master of the Raincloak sect is. Huan Jihao says he doesn't know either, as the man is very mysterious. Hanju asks if he's confident, but Huan Jihao doesn't like so many questions and begins to question the protagonist's intentions. Soon, Hanju realizes his opponent is becoming impatient, so he can proceed with the plan. He then says he's willing to accept Huan Jihao as his master, but only if he can take a hit from his future disciple. Huan Jihao notices the boldness but agrees, stating that if he suffers any damage from the strike, no matter how small, he'll leave this place and never return to the Pure Jade sect. That being so, the protagonist tells him to get ready. Huan Jihao sees the protagonist draw a sword that isn't so ordinary and wonders how someone so weak could possess such a weapon. Hanju unleashes his spiritual energy, which shocks the opponent, as Huan Jihao sees this won't go how he imagined. He then prepares his defense, summoning a wind barrier. That way he believes he'll be more protected. However, upon seeing the protagonist approach, Huan Jihao panics, and right after, his defense is shattered by the blow he takes. Huan Jihao manages to regain his balance and realizes he was struck by a mystical spell. After that, the protagonist says the opponent's reaction time is impressive and asks if the famous Huan Jihao will keep his word. Huan Jihao says he was tricked, but the protagonist insists that he warned him. Then Huan Jihao says that even if it was a trick, that attack couldn't be withstood, and asks who the protagonist truly is. Hanju says that it was Huan Jihao who came looking for him, and even asks who he is. With that, Huan Jihao realizes who he's dealing with, and says he promised never to return to the Pure Jade sect, but will wait until the protagonist leaves the sect to challenge him again. Hanju thinks he'll be waiting a long time. As he leaves, Huan Jihao feels bad for having been fooled, and also believes he was reckless and reacted too slowly, which nearly cost him his life. Suddenly, someone appears and asks who he is, and why he's going to the Pure Jade sect. The person says Huan Jihao's movements are suspicious and assumes he's a bandit. But Huan Jihao says that who he is none of the man's business. However, the mysterious man says the elders of the sect might have a better impression of him if he captures an enemy and brings him in. Huan Jihao, in turn, says he won't be captured so easily, and says he was just worried he had no one to unleash his anger on. For having defeated Huan Jihao, the protagonist's system rewards him. Hanju is feeling very pleased with himself and says that now no one will dare to challenge him again. But he hears a voice coming from outside his cave and realizes that his master has taken the initiative to visit him. He asks why his master took the trouble to come personally. The fairy says Chang Yu must have already told him about Elder Guan Yuvang. Fadixuan says he returned to the sect yesterday, but on the way he crossed paths with Huan Jihao and was seriously injured. The protagonist isn't too surprised, since something like that is expected from Huan Jihao. The fairy says that in truth, he was defeated by Huan Jihao, who was already injured beforehand, and beyond that, an unknown sword key destroyed a nearby forest. So she deduces that Huan Jihao came to the sect to challenge her disciple and was repelled by him. Hanju confirms that's what happened and says he'll take responsibility for the damage. However, the fairy says there's no need for that. She just didn't expect Huan Jihao to be defeated so easily by someone younger. And this time, she hopes Hanju will help her suppress Guan Yugang. The fairy says that the sect master spared no effort to protect her and even delayed his own cultivation for it, so it would be bad if he stepped down from his position. Moreover, Guan Yugang seeks revenge, but instead of defeating the sect master, the master suggests that Hanju be the one to fight him. The protagonist agrees as long as the fight is discreet. His master agrees too, after all. She believes Guan Yugang would also prefer it that way. Then she notices that Hanju is raising a chicken and says it looks interesting. Hanju says that cultivating in seclusion is lonely, so he brought this little one to keep him company. The fairy is surprised that he gets bored. That reminds her that the immortal domain gathering is about to begin. Hanju doesn't know what that is, but his master explains it's a fair that happens once every century, where many valuable items are traded, and she asks if he wants to go. But as always, the protagonist says he'd rather stay in seclusion and cultivate instead. Far away, at the Crimson Bird Sword sect, Huan Jihao is scolded for failing to defeat the demon-slaying elder. His master says that, aside from himself, Huan Jihao is the strongest person in their sect, but his disciple argues that the opponent's energy was unmatched. He had never seen anything like it. Moreover, he says that person was incredibly charming, and he's never met anyone as beautiful as him. Tang Han, the sect master, asks if that's really important. Huan Jihao, clearly embarrassed, says no, but he brings up another matter. The Raincoat sect still has its eyes on the Pure Jade sect, and once he fully recovers, he intends to challenge their leader again. Tang Han says that the Grand Elder of the Pure Jade sect visited him, hoping to unite against the Raincoat sect, but he rejected the proposal, because the sect will never fall unless its master is eliminated, and he says that, in his youth, the Raincoat sect's master was as fearless as Huan Jihao. By a twist of fate, he fell to the demonic path and became the sect master of the Raincoat sect, and during his prime, he was the strongest in the world. With that, he says Huan Jihao can test his strength against him, but he must not be reckless, and if he realizes he can't win, he should retreat immediately. Huan Jihao tells his master not to worry, and says that while he may be arrogant, he's not an idiot. 7 years pass, and the protagonist has been monitoring his enemies and allies during that time using his system. His chicken learned how to speak during this period, and asks how the outside world is. It says it's also curious about what lies beyond the mountain. Hanju realizes the chicken is growing fast. Its strength is close to the 8th level of foundation establishment, and if it were human, no one would keep up with its cultivation. Besides all that, its intelligence is developing, and it's even become curious about the outside world. However, he tells it that the outside world is dangerous, and many people would want to capture it and use it as food. He also shows some places and says all of them are off limits, claiming the chicken needs to keep that in mind and never go near them. He also says the chicken needs to become invincible before leaving the cave, otherwise it will definitely die. Besides, not even he dares to go out much, so the chicken says he can stop because its desire to leave has vanished. Hanju thinks the brainwashing was a success. Suddenly, Lei Qingzi shows up, saying something terrible has happened. The Maple Leaf Valley has been destroyed by the Raincoat sect. Before dying, the sect master of the valley said the Raincoat sect has at least 10 soul formation cultivators, which is more than enough to sweep through the cultivation world. And there's a high chance that the next target is the Pure Jade sect. Upon hearing this, the protagonist quickly prepares his things, including grabbing his pet chicken and a few important items. After that, he asks why Lei Qingzi isn't getting ready to flee too. This is quite surprising, since Lei Qingzi thought Elder Han was actually preparing to face the crisis, not run from it. Hanju is doing this because he sees no other plausible option. But this is exactly the opposite of what Lei Qingzi expected. He tries to convince Elder Han not to leave and says he came here to warn him to prepare in advance, not to encourage him to run away. Moreover, he says there's nowhere safe to run to. Even if they manage to escape, the Raincoat sect will chase them down until everyone is gone. Eventually, the Pure Jade sect would be wiped out. Hanju thinks everything would be fine as long as they stay alive, but he knows how important the sect is to Lei Qingzi. He wonders where he could run to because he doesn't want to keep wandering the world forever, and standing still feels like cowardice. So he concludes that if Lei Qingzi is giving an early warning, it means the enemies are not close yet. Lei Qingzi says it will take some time before they approach, and it could take up to a decade until they attack. Hanju asks why his sect keeps being the target of attacks, since he believed the Pure Jade sect was formidable. Lei Qingzi says that Elder Han is praising the sect to a level they don't deserve. In truth, he states that the only truly powerful person in the sect was the ancestral founder. He left them 500 years ago without a single word, and if he were still around, no one would dare attack them because 1,000 years ago, the founder destroyed the Raincloak sect and made their master question his own existence. So now, Raincloak seeks revenge, but Lee Kingsley says they used a treasure left by the founder to try and contact him, and once he returns, the problem will be solved. Still, he says that in the meantime, they must be strong and survive whatever comes, because if they make it through this, there will be no more threats in the future. An Elder Hand will be able to continue cultivating in peace, so the protagonist agrees to help and says he won't back down now. However, he says that if he realizes he can't win, he'll flee immediately. Lee Kingsley agrees and says he won't ask him to die for the sect. After agreeing to help, Hanju asks if there's any pill in the sect suitable for a nascent soul cultivator. Lee Kingsley says they're short on alchemists and can't help with pills, so the protagonist turns his back and leaves. Lee Kingsley becomes desperate and reminds him that he promised to help. Hanju says he's not running away, he's going to buy a beast-taming pouch, but secretly, he thinks this will make it easier to escape. Even his chicken suggests they escape in secret. Hanji realizes the animal has learned his way of thinking, but he wants to wait and see for now. After that, he heads to the inner city of the main peak. But the chicken doesn't enjoy the trip much, since it's being transported in a way that draws too much attention. In the middle of all this, the protagonist's system alerts him that a bearer of innate providence has been detected. Immediately, he thinks that the Pure Jade sect must definitely be a sect of providence bearers. He sees that the person in question is named Shiwan Kingjin, a demon lord in disguise with very strong attributes. So Hanju thinks that to be able to ascend like that, she must be at least a Mahayana cultivator. After that, he sees there's only one girl in the area, and she must be the one. Shiwan Kingjin, in her human form, is quite attractive. When they see her, the men nearby become mesmerized by her beauty, and even start fighting over her, even though some know they would never have a chance with such a beautiful woman. For her part, Shiwan Kingjin finds it all very boring, as she just wanted to travel the world and experience life, until she senses a subtle aura nearby, and ends up seeing the protagonist walking. She soon concludes that maybe she can stay around for a little longer. The protagonist's system alerts that Shiwan Kingjin has developed 1 star of affection for him just by seeing his face. Hanju wanted to sneak away to avoid unnecessary problems and didn't expect his charm to get in the way again. But Shiwan Kingjin approaches him and her affection increases to 2 stars. Even his chicken noticed that this woman's intentions toward him aren't good, so the protagonist tries to escape. Shiwan Kingjin follows the protagonist to his cave because she found him interesting and notices that the inscription outside actually makes sense. This only makes her more and more curious about him, and she decides to save the best for last and will return to see him again. Hanju feels relieved that she decided to leave and concludes that she can't find the entrance due to the formation barrier. The protagonist knows she appears to be a Foundation Realm cultivator, but also knows she hides tremendous power, and this could be a future problem. Therefore, he just hopes Shiwan Kingjin forgets about him. 7 years of cultivation have passed, but Hanju feels his progress is slow, since his goal is to advance before the sect is attacked by the enemy. He sees that during his cultivation, some allies were attacked and wonders how that happened, since he didn't see any other spy nearby. Until he remembers Guan Yu Gang and sees that he didn't dare challenge the demon-slaying elder, so he gave up on the idea of becoming sect master. However, he was furious and went after Lei Kingzi for a duel, using the opportunity to vent his anger. On the other hand, his master apparently had no trouble. After that, Shiwan Kingjin shows up for a visit, and the protagonist wonders why she appeared again. In the past 7 years, Shiwan Kingjin showed up twice and was rejected both times, but she never forced her way in. However, the protagonist thinks that if he keeps ignoring her, that might change, so he finally decides to speak with her. But the protagonist's chicken feels afraid for him and begs Shiwan Kingjin not to devour her master. Hanju takes over the conversation and asks why Shiwan Kingjin came to visit him. She introduces herself as a disciple from the Jade Bamboo Peak and says that ever since she first saw him, she's never been able to forget him, and she apologizes for the unexpected visit, but says his beauty is unique in the world. That's why she's willing to offer him a treasure in hopes he won't refuse, as it's the symbol of the celestial immortal abode. This abode is a sacred land for cultivation, and with this letter, it's possible to reach the place. Anyone who cultivates their will, at the very least, reach the nascent soul realm. Shiwan Kingjin believes the protagonist won't resist such temptation, and thinks she'll finally get what she wants from him with this offer. But contrary to her expectations, Hanju refuses, saying he doesn't want to leave his sect since he's decided to cultivate there for life. Since he showed no interest, Shiwan Kingjin says she has more to offer. Then she presents the Earth Spirit Sword, claiming it can easily kill a Golden Core expert. However, that still isn't enough to make him yield. So, Shuan Kingjin offers a jar of pills that can help the user break through to the Golden Core realm. Even so, the protagonist doesn't pay attention. Next, she offers a body refinement cultivation technique, including 3 additional spells. But before she can continue, the protagonist interrupts and says he's already in the nascent soul realm, so her offers aren't appealing. That information unlocks a hidden cultivation for him, and Senwan Kingjin realizes this can only mean the protagonist is the demon-slaying elder. Hanju asks her to keep that a secret, but this increases her favorability toward him by 4 stars. She says that now his needs are clear and offers him a first-class nascent soul pill, claiming it will help him advance to the soul formation realm, and if 1 jar isn't enough, she can get him another. The protagonist thinks she must be filthy rich and asks about her life story. Shuan Kingjin says her identity isn't what matters most. What she wants is to become his Dao companion, and she asks if he feels the same. Hanju says that to show so many treasures, she must not be someone simple, and asks if she could help deal with the Raincoat sect. She says no because she only cares about him, not his sect. As expected, Hanju realizes it's not so easy to give orders to a demon lady, so he asks what price he would have to pay if he accepted her proposal. Shuan Kingjin says the price is for both of them to cultivate together and grow stronger. With that, the protagonist's system alerts him of a new mission. Refusing or accepting will grant different rewards, and it's up to Hanju to choose the right option. Back in the Raincoat sect, one of them goes to the prison and whips some of the prisoners, giving them no rest. He says these 2 are too stubborn. They try to escape every year and refuse to give up even after being caught and beaten. One of them suggests killing them, but the other says there's no way to win their hearts if they're dead. He's tired of beating them, so the one in charge tells someone to take them back to their cell. Zhou thinks that if he attains enlightenment in the future, he will definitely kill everyone from the Raincoat sect. Once they're alone, Yang Tandong complains that his friend's escape plan didn't work, then suggests they stop resisting and just wait for their master to come rescue them. But Zhou says the demon-slaying elder won't show up. Yet Yang Tandong doesn't believe that, and says that no one in the sect is a match for his master. Zhou agrees with that, but says there's only one problem. Hanju is afraid of dying. Still, Tandong doesn't lose hope, and insists that at any moment, his master will show up to save them. Speaking of the protagonist, he receives from his system the Somersault Mist, a mystical power that can transport the user over 1,000,000 kilometers in seconds. Now, Shuan Kingjin says that Hanju is her Dao companion and reminds him to always work hard in his cultivation, saying she will come to him whenever she needs. With that, her affection for the protagonist increases by 4.5 stars. Shortly after, the protagonist laments no longer being pure. Besides that, the number of pills Shuan Kingjin gave him isn't enough. His chicken says that sooner or later, he might be devoured, but Hanju tells the chicken not to speak ill of his Dao companion. Next, he begins to feel the effects of the pill, and says that the first-class nascent soul pill has a dominating effect. His ki was completely purified, and the absorption rate that had been stagnant for so many years became fast again. Now he realizes that the pill provides a leap he would have taken ages to reach, but he thinks he can't rely only on pills. He has to work hard too. 2 years have passed, and the advancement to the soul formation realm is now very close. And now Hanju is 1 step away from his goal, so he starts a simulated training exercise. Hanju sees that there's been no movement from the enemy sect in recent years, which gave him the time he needed to cultivate. Now he says he's going to the realm of 10,000 demons and leaves the chicken in charge of the cave. Upon leaving, Li Qingzi appears, bringing good news. He says that Huan Zhihao went to challenge the master of the enemy sect and ended up being captured, so the Crimson Bird sect got angry and decided to ally with the Pure Jade sect. He also says that finally that guy did something useful, because now both sects have a common enemy. After that, Li Qingzi has an invitation for Elder Han, but the protagonist has a bad feeling about it, so he changes the subject. Hanju tells Li Qingzi to take all the elders into battle, as he alone will be able to protect the Pure Jade sect. He also says that he's about to advance to soul formation and needs a little more time to cultivate. Li Qingzi understands and says he will act as Elder Han said. The protagonist says goodbye to him and continues his journey to the realm of 10,000 demons. Along the way, he thinks that ascending to the soul formation realm is deafening and could attract people to attack him, so the demon realm is the best place to cultivate, because there he'll have one less thing to worry about, and he thinks that today he will make the breakthrough he needs. From afar, a storm approaches and scares some animals. Unlike them, the protagonist is waiting for it, as he intends to use the phenomenon to his advantage. A few kilometers away in the Raincloak sect, someone approaches and shows his ID at the gate. The guard sees the plaque and sees that this individual's name is Zhu Warudo. Though suspicious, he lets him in since he was bribed with an adult Manhwa. Little does the guard know that this individual is an infiltrator from the rival sect. Meanwhile, there's movement inside, as the elder ordered everyone to go to the main gate. From inside his cell, Joe Fan sees all the movement and asks why half of them are in such a rush. Yang Tandong thinks something must have happened, until he concludes that maybe it's his master who finally showed up to rescue him. But Joe Fan says the sects must have formed an alliance, and now the enemies are mobilizing as many people as possible to fight against them. He suggests taking advantage of this to escape, but Yang Tandong prefers to stay and wait for his master to arrive. Zhao says that's a waste of an opportunity and argues that they may not get another chance like this. But while he speaks, the prison ceiling collapses and nearly hits them. Then, a silhouette approaches, and Li Qingzi appears, saying he's there to rescue them. Back to the protagonist, he finally reaches the Soul Formation realm, and in addition to gaining new powers, his life expectancy increases to 3,000 years. After returning to his cave, his chicken is happy to see him, because it was starting to think its master had been devoured by that woman. But Hanju asks if that's really all the chicken thinks about. He also says that for now, it's just a chicken, but it could become a phoenix if it cultivates properly. Hanju checks on the condition of his allies and learns of the prison escape, but all he can do is wish them luck, because he can't lead the sect right now to help. Suddenly, Xuan Qingjin appears unexpectedly, saying she heard about Hanju's breakthroughs. He gets startled and asks how she reached his cave so quickly. But knowing Xuan Qingjin, he already knows what she wants, and wonders if he should give in or resist. Thinking about it drives him more and more insane, because Hanju knows she's a demon lady and could easily be thousands of years old, so no one would believe she actually fell in love with a mortal. But to his surprise, Xuan Qingjin says she's there to say goodbye, because she's leaving and she doesn't know when she'll see him again. So she wanted to give him one last farewell. She asks if there's anything Hanju wants before her departure, and says she'll do her best to fulfill his wishes. The protagonist tells her not to leave because he'll feel lonely without her, but Xuan Qingjin can see that his face says exactly the opposite. Xuan Qingjin says she needs him, but now isn't the time. She also tells Hanju not to think about her, because she's not yet ready to be by his side every day. So Hanju asks if she has any pills that can boost cultivation in the Soul Formation realm. She says she only has 4 bottles, but agrees to leave them all with him. However, since she won't be able to see his face for a long time, she becomes reluctant. Even though Hanju is in the Soul Formation realm, he's still not invincible. So Xuan Qingjin tells him to stay in his current sect and focus more on his cultivation. She also tells him not to wander around because the world is a dangerous place. After that, she leaves. Hanju thinks that Xuan Qingjin was just passing through the Pure Jade sect and is heading elsewhere to comprehend the Tao. On the other hand, the chicken thinks she no longer has to worry about her master becoming that woman's food. Back in the Raincoat sect, the leader says the Crimson Bird Sword sect has chosen to fight them to the death, and asks the elders what they think about this. One of them suggests intimidating them by killing Huan Jihao immediately. Most agree with this suggestion. However, the sect master says the rivals must be acting this way because they received support from someone. Then the others say the master is overthinking it, and they're getting impatient. They don't want to wait any longer. They say the master should stop underestimating their own sect, because with their 10 soul formation cultivators, no rival could match them. The master says he's not being overly cautious. He simply has a tendency to imagine the worst-case scenario first. A disciple steps forward and says the master's caution borders on irrationality. He also says they've delayed the plan long enough, and now they can't wait anymore. He suggests that the sect send some elders to ambush the enemy's base, claiming that their main force is fighting the Raincoat sect, which means the enemy's base is currently unguarded. Therefore, it would be a good opportunity to attack and catch them off guard. With that, the sect master asks if everyone agrees to go to war. They all say yes, and they thirst for blood. Immediately, Huang Zhenshin, the sect master, says he'll handle it himself. Along with spiritual master Shan Kui, they'll go to the Pure Jade and Crimson Bird sects. The others agree to proceed with this plan. One of the disciples tells Master Shanqi to stay firm when the time comes, because he fears the sect master might try to stall again. Back to the protagonist, he thinks that even though he's made great progress, his cultivation is still lacking. His concern isn't the Raincoat sect, but Xeoa. Even with his void amalgamation power, he's only an elder in the demon taming sect. Hanju thinks that sect's past is deeply disturbing. After that, Chan Yu appears for a visit. She says she's there on the master's orders. She wants him to come to Serene Peak to discuss something important. The protagonist thinks it's rare for his master to summon him, so he goes immediately to Serene Peak. At the peak, all of the master's disciples are gathered, until Liu Sangson, the head disciple, asks for silence because the master has arrived. But they see that the master is not alone. At her side is Hanju. They wonder why the two are standing side by side, and how Hanju became someone worthy of sitting next to the master. until it starts to sink in. They realize that Hanju can only be the demon-slaying elder. That's the only way he could stand on equal ground with the master. Lee Sang-sun tells everyone to keep this a secret. For his part, the protagonist wonders what his master is trying to do. The fairy says that during this time, she wants everyone to stop their secluded cultivation and patrol the sect because the sect master sent a message. He reported that he is working together with the Crimson Bird sect to fight against the enemies and even rescued the prisoners. However, the enemies might be preparing an ambush. That's why they need to reinforce the defenses around the sect, since soul formation cultivators from the enemy side are approaching. Kairixuan also says that the Serene Peak was the one that contributed the least to the sect, not only because it has fewer disciples, but also because it was favored by the master. Because of that, they had years to cultivate diligently. But now she says they must give back and show who they really are. Hanju thinks that the outer sect is the first line of defense. Protecting it is the same as courting death. For them to have that kind of resolve, they are worthy of many years of cultivation. His master asks if Hanju has the determination to defend against ambushes from experts of the enemy sect. He realizes that his master is using him to calm the others, so he plays along and says out loud that he has some experience fighting strong opponents. Haixuan asks what level he has cultivated to. The protagonist replies that he reached the first level. Then his master asks if he spent so many years cultivating just to reach such a low level, but he says he reached the first level of the soul formation realm. Immediately, his master realizes he really isn't joking. After that, Haixuan dismisses the other disciples and tells them to take their positions. In the midst of this, some of them notice a strange look on their master's face and think it's the first time she's ever looked so unsettled. Haixuan, in turn, thinks that without even noticing, Hanju advanced to the nascent soul realm, and now once again, to the soul formation realm. She says that Hanju no longer seems to see her as his master. She knows she never really taught him anything, but she didn't expect him to progress so far on his own. In any case, she says the favor Hanju did for the sect is far greater than anything offered in return, so she says that whatever he needs, she'll find a way to provide it. So Hanju asks if she has any soul formation pills, but Saixuan says she doesn't. The protagonist then asks if she could help him in some other way to strengthen the spiritual energy of his cave dwelling. His master says she'll do her best. The fairy thinks that Hanju is evolving very quickly, and when the time comes, this place will no longer be suitable for such a giant Buddha like him. But as she watches how Hanju says goodbye, Tairixuan has a vision and realizes that he and the ancestral founder of the sect are very similar. So she asks her disciple to wait a moment and asks how much longer he can remain in the pure Jade sect. She claims that people always search for a place in the sun, and water continues to follow its course. Because he's becoming strong very quickly, Xaixuan says that maybe one day the pure Jade sect will become a burden for Hanju. The protagonist in turn says that he would have fled a long time ago if he wanted to, but he chose to stay. Besides, even if there are other places to go, it doesn't matter. Wherever it is, there will always be trouble. Rather than wander aimlessly, he prefers to stay in one fixed place to cultivate. Taixuan says that there are many other sects in the cultivation world that are even more powerful than theirs, and asks if Hanju isn't afraid of stagnating by staying there. Hanju simply says that if one day he decides to leave, his master will be the first to know. But he thinks to himself that he prefers to stay on top of the world than crawl among the higher realms. Then he receives an alert from the system, saying that the Raincloak sect is about to invade. Near the entrance, the Raincloak sect master, along with Shan Kui, analyze the place. Wang Zunshin says they seem very weak and asks if this is some kind of trap. Shan Kui says he already conducted a preliminary investigation and confirms that the rivals have no soul formation cultivators and only 10 at the nascent soul level. The master says that even so, he feels worried, as he has a sense that something is wrong. His ally says they can't afford to miss this opportunity, and claims that if the Raincloak sect is destroyed due to the master's cowardice, he will never be forgiven. Even so, the master says they will just continue observing. Then Shan Kui thinks that if it weren't for the fact that he couldn't overpower him, he would have stolen his position as sect master a long time ago. On the other hand, the protagonist sees that the enemy looks quite a lot like him and only came there because he used the simulated challenge earlier. At first he thought it was a system error, but soon realized Huang Zunshin was interesting. While the enemies argue among themselves, Hanju approaches and asks if the Raincoat sect only sent 2 people to attack them. Huang Zunshin didn't see the protagonist approaching, nor did he sense his presence, so he concludes that, indeed, this was a trap. On the other hand, Shan Kui says that the 2 of them are enough, and he wants to see what the protagonist is capable of. Then he prepares his ability called Jisekite Celestial Devourer and gets ready to attack, but the master tells him to wait because something feels off. However, Shankui tells his master not to be afraid, because even if the opponent is that demon-slaying elder, he believes he can easily defeat him. Hanju had heard that the enemy sect's master dislikes killing, so he asks why they're targeting the Pure Jade sect. Wang Xunshin hesitates to answer. Immediately, his ally steps in and doesn't want to talk, only fight. But Hanju prepares to counter with his triple shadow sword. Shankui didn't even manage to touch the protagonist, because before that he was torn to pieces. All of it happened right in front of the enemy sect's master, and his fear of fighting the protagonist only grew stronger. Since Shankui's body was destroyed, only his soul essence remained. He then says he now understands why his master is always so cautious. The master laments what happened, but before he can do anything, Hanju uses his illusory 7 steps and finishes off the enemy's soul once and for all. Wang Xunshin realizes that his opponent just defeated an elder at the 7th level of the soul formation realm as if it were nothing, and thinks that, as a cultivator at the 9th level of soul formation, he can't even begin to measure the extent of the protagonist's power. So he concludes that the protagonist must be stronger than the soul formation realm, probably in the void amalgamation realm. Because of that, Wang Xunshin decides to flee, claiming that as long as one of them lives, his sect will never stop fighting. While running, Wang Xunshin thinks his instincts were right. He knew something was wrong. Now he just wants to return home and grow stronger to avenge his ally. However, the protagonist chases after him, riding his somersault cloud, and prevents Wang Xunshin from escaping. Cornered, Wang Xunshin begs for his life, saying he can order his sect to cease fire. But Hanju says his wish is to cut the evil out by the root. Wang Xunshin says he never wanted this war, but as sect master, he ended up taking on the responsibility. He claims that if not for him, many prisoners would have died. Hanju considers that might be true after all. Both Zhou Fan and Yang Tiandong are still alive. Also, the fact that the enemy hates killing has delayed his sect's plans. With that, Wang Xunshin says that if his life is spared, he will return home and never attack the Pure Jade sect again. The protagonist asks if he's telling the truth. Wang Xunshin says yes, and thinks he's managing to negotiate with the protagonist. But Hanju doesn't believe him, and says that until now the enemy hasn't been able to stop the war between the two sects, so he wouldn't be able to change its course now. It's already too late. But surprisingly, Wang Xunshin comes back to life. Hanju wonders if this is some sort of illusion or a clone, until he realizes it's a death substitution talisman, but he's heard that one of those is extremely expensive, so he concludes the enemy must be quite wealthy. However, he wants to put an end to this once and for all, because he thinks he can use the sect leader's death to intimidate the Raincoat sect and stop this war. Meanwhile, Wang Xunshin thinks he can't fight the protagonist, since his technique is far superior, and that he only survived by sheer luck. Now he wants to use that to his advantage and teleport to his secret base, because unless the protagonist can attack 100 times in a split second, he'll never be able to interrupt this formation, and Wang Xunshin believes the protagonist isn't at that level yet. But right after that, he witnesses with his own eyes that he was completely wrong in his conclusion, because the protagonist uses his 10,000 sword summoning technique, which makes Wang Xunshin wonder why his opponent has so many techniques. Soon after, the swords fall from the sky like rain. Nearby, some members of the Pure Jade sect feel a fluctuation of energy and decide to go check it out. But when they arrive at the scene, they are left speechless, because such destruction could only have been caused by one person. After defeating the enemy, the protagonist returned to his cave. However, instead of destroying Wang Xunshin's soul, he decided to imprison him. The enemy is still in shock. He asks who the protagonist really is and how he's able to use such powerful secret techniques. Wang Xunshin also thinks he's never been so humiliated in his life. The protagonist has a habit of mocking his enemies and always makes up a fake name when introducing himself to them. This time he says his name is Zhao Zilong from Mount Chan, which confuses Wang Xunshin, as he's never heard of that place before. However, Hanju tells him to shut up, since he's not in a position to ask questions, only to answer them.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.